The mansion belonged to Duke Adelhart, and he bore the name Ivan. This majestic house towered over the hillside, as if guarding the peace of the entire area. Ivan looked at the pink-haired Isabella coldly, as if she were an enemy who had appeared without warning and disrupted his measured daily routine. Although this was probably how it should have been, he still wondered what had prompted the girl to appear here so suddenly without any notice. Isabella understood perfectly well that now she just needed to surrender to the will of fate. No matter how this conversation turned out, everything no longer depended on her. She, turning to Duke Ivan, calmly said that she wanted to propose breaking off their engagement, seeing no point in it for the future. Ivan responded with bewilderment and asked what they were talking about. There was a slight irritation and anger in his voice. Isabella replied that neither she nor he needed such a union because this marriage of convenience would not bring happiness to either party. A week before this whole strange turn of events, the old Isabella passed away, and no one could stop it. The girl was still a student at the time, and although an ambulance was called for her, the doctors were too late to intervene. She died. It all started with a tragic car accident, after which she woke up not in her room but in a completely unfamiliar place. Opening her eyes, she saw an unfamiliar environment in front of her, and quickly realized that this was not her native world at all. Isabella jumped out of bed and rushed to the nearest mirror to make sure that this was not just a dream. When she looked at her reflection, she saw someone else's appearance. That's when she realized that she had been reborn as a novel. It all seemed strange and absurd, like a scene from a banal novel about a time traveler where the heroine finds herself in someone else's body. She was now in the body of a girl named Isabella Van Eyne, and it was from this moment that her new story began. After marrying Ivan, she became the stepmother of Lucifer, the Duke's son, who turned out to be the son of his sister Julia. The former Isabella was a cruel and unfair stepmother, and her hatred for her stepson knew no bounds. Like Lucifer, Isabella herself was an illegitimate child, but fate treated them very differently. Unlike Isabella, Lucifer was loved and cared for in the duchy, and he felt needed and accepted. This is why Isabella was consumed with envy towards Lucifer. She could not accept the fact that someone was receiving the love that was denied to her. She believed that he should be treated the same way as she was, with coldness, contempt, and no sympathy. Because of this injustice and inner rage, she began to poison the boy, but eventually her crimes were revealed, and she was expelled from the duchy with nothing. After her exile, Isabella wandered without means, and soon died during an outbreak of an epidemic, never having received forgiveness. When evil was finally punished, many readers of the novel rejoiced because justice had triumphed. Han So-yoon was one of those attentive readers who didn't just flip through the pages, but immersed themselves in the plot, remembering details and reflecting on what was happening. Moreover, she stood out for her activity. She commented on almost every new chapter, discussed characters, and left lengthy reflections under posts. Fortunately, at the moment, Isabella, it seems, had not yet become Ivan's wife, and she still had the opportunity to change something in her destiny. It is indeed easier to break off an engagement than to go through divorce proceedings, and if Isabella wants to survive, as in the original story, she must act decisively. It might be possible to be polite even to Lucifer, but the main and most dangerous threat still came from the Duke himself, and that could not be ignored. Isabella dreamed of being married, but to someone who at least did not harbor such fierce hatred for her as the saint, who for some reason found her disgusting. She didn't know how to behave or what to do when the need to think about survival, about money, and the daily struggle for her position disappeared. Most likely, if everything remained as before, her life could truly be called hellish, devoid of choice and real happiness. After her divorce from Ivan, Isabella was going to start searching for a new meaning, to find her own business that could captivate her and give her a new goal. He had to be careful not to let the original story go astray, especially if he really wanted to know if this was her true will. She firmly replied that it was her own will, and added that her father did not even suspect her intentions, having decided everything alone. In that case, the Duke really saw no reason to object, and did not insist further since he no longer had a choice. He made it clear that he was ready to pretend that he had not heard these words at all, and would not interfere with her decision in order to avoid unnecessary conflict. However, he still threw out a phrase about her having to go back, but Isabella tried to stop him, not wanting him to leave. She grabbed his hand, trying to hold it back, but he quickly pulled it away, not allowing the touch to drag him into an unnecessary conversation. Then she quietly but directly stated that she understood why he had actually agreed to the engagement and decided to tie himself to her. According to her, it was probably her father who insisted on this marriage, offering something important, or even threatening to achieve an agreement. In fact, it looked more like a direct threat disguised as an offer which concealed much darker intentions. He asked why she was saying all this if she already knew the truth, and Isabella replied that she was ready to pass on everything she knew to her father. In return, she wanted only one thing: for him to break off the engagement and stop this whole game before it went too far. The Duke asked where she got such information if she had not taken part in the conversations and should not have known about it. Isabella said that she could not reveal the source because in reality, she learned all this from a book which was beyond her ability to explain, but she assured that the information really remained only between her and her father, and it was unlikely that anyone else could know anything about it. After thinking for a moment, Ivan finally said that he understood Isabella perfectly, even if he did not express it clearly. He also added that he would definitely think about it so Isabella could go calmly. In any case, be that as it may, it wouldn't hurt to see her off, at least out of politeness. But the Duke, of course, did not do this, which, however, is not surprising given his character. Suddenly, she heard the boy's voice, and this voice sounded unexpected to her. Lucifer was clearly delighted when he saw Isabella, whom he called his mother. He suggested that if everything was okay, we should eat cookies with him today. This child, Lucifer, was very sweet and charming despite his age. The maid came up and, bowing slightly, informed the young master that they needed to say hello first. Lucifer quickly justified himself by saying that he simply forgot and immediately added the missing word. He said he was glad to meet her, and the lady also greeted the younger Duke of Adelhart. Lucifer was embarrassed. For the first time, someone greeted him by handing him a piece of paper with an inscription. Isabella was different from the others, and he was surprised that she already knew who he was. The lady replied that it was obvious. He looked very much like the Duke, and Lucifer probably already knew that her name was Isabella. She also mentioned tea drinking in passing as if it were incidental. If she ever visits him, Lucifer might be truly delighted. After all, she will become his stepmother, and this will inevitably cause internal awkwardness. So Isabella decided to apologize to him so that there would be no misunderstandings. She explained that for certain reasons, she would not be able to join the tea party. After all, she didn't want to have false hopes. The engagement would be broken off only a matter of time. Lucifer was very embarrassed, blushed, and asked for forgiveness. He did not expect a refusal. Isabella gently replied that everything was fine and that she was the one who should apologize. It was time to leave, and she stepped back from the younger Duke with restraint, without saying anything unnecessary. Lucifer Adelhart was Ivan's son by marriage, not a bastard as many thought. In the original, he is portrayed as being as cold as his father, Duke Ivan. He is able to silence anyone with just one look. Lucifer's childhood was spent alone like a house lost in a storm. The Duke solemnly announced that his successor was now Lucifer, whom he recognized as his son. This news came unexpectedly and caused much controversy in the hall. However, those gathered did not immediately understand what exactly the Duke meant. For them, the state of the Duchess and the unresolved issue of the true blood heir were more important now. In their opinion, this sounded absurd. After all, it was impossible for an illegitimate child, no matter what he was, to suddenly become the legitimate successor of an ancient family. Of course, everyone understood that Ivan was worried about the younger Duke, but they believed that his opinion would definitely change when he saw what such a decision would lead to. The Duke demanded silence, and with cold determination declared that this was his final choice, and if anyone disagreed with him, let them speak out right now. He threatened to personally cut the throat of anyone who dared to dispute his words or openly contradict him. If there are no more topics or objections, and if no one wishes to say anything important, the Duke officially ends this meeting. Meanwhile, there was a quiet whisper in the hall. Perhaps Lucifer's mother was not a noblewoman, but a simple townswoman, or even someone of lower origin. Lydia, who was nearby, turned to her and with slight curiosity decided to ask why she was so sure of this. The girl replied that she knew the Duke. If he wanted, he would marry even a woman who had lost her title if only she were worthy. But now next to him there is only Lucifer, the only junior Duke without a mother, without a title, without official recognition. It seemed that this woman about whom everyone was talking was even lower in status than a commoner. She was so unknown. People were sure that if that woman had any moral principles, she would have sent her child to a boarding school long ago. This, according to one, would at least look like a merciful act. The other girl claimed that in her case the child would have ended up in a monastery. While the storm raged outside, Lucifer thought of only one thing. He never had a mother, and he did not know what her warmth was. He heard every word the adults said, and he increasingly wanted to have a woman next to him whom he could call mother. Lucifer prayed night after night, not missing a single evening, and asked for a real mother to finally appear in his life. Isabella noticed that the boy often cried alone. She wondered if perhaps she should allow herself to be weak and give in just once. After all, nothing will happen if they just spend a little time together and calmly drink a cup of tea in silence. If it weren't for Isabella in this body, then perhaps everything would have been different. Someone would have definitely taken a little more care of Lucifer. All Isabella needs now is to break off the engagement that is weighing her down and start living the life she really wants. Mr. Ivan approached her and asked a simple question. Where had she been? Why had she been absent for so long without saying a word to anyone? Isabella was so exhausted that she forgot that Ivan was also in the mansion and could not be ignored like that. The young man sharply remarked that she should answer when spoken to, especially if the question was asked by a man in the house. It was her half-brother Derek Vinane, and he, as usual, had come only to annoy Isabella and ruin her evening. If you think about it, Isabella herself was a victim to some extent. Her mother was just a simple servant in the rich and noble Vinane family, and even then fate left her no choice. This woman was so beautiful that one day the Count himself, who was the head of the family, noticed her and, forgetting about his status, showed interest in her, which she did not expect. Thus, Isabella was born, the result of their short but fatal relationship, who became a living reminder of the events that her mother wanted to forget. Fearing the consequences and knowing that an illegitimate child could incur the wrath of the family, she decides to flee the estate, taking the baby with her. However, fate did not spare her. She soon fell ill. Fearing to die and leave Isabella alone, she wrote a letter to the Count in despair, begging for help. When the Count received this letter, he felt no sympathy. Instead, he felt fury because she had not only disobeyed, but also hidden the child from him. He was shocked to learn that his maid had given birth to a daughter. This fact threatened his position and reputation in society. At first, he intended to get rid of both of them to hide the shame, but when they met in person, something in him wavered, and his decision changed abruptly. The maid, almost losing consciousness from fear, asked to leave at least the girl alive. The Count realized that the child was incredibly similar to her mother. He reasoned that such a beautiful girl would one day bring profit. A good price could be obtained for her on the marriage market. Then the Count gave the woman a choice. Either she leaves with him immediately, or she stays here to die, and then she should not expect any help. If she goes with him, he will call the best doctor to help her cope with the disease, and this will be her last chance. Isabella had no other choice. In that house, she was considered a sinner and hated for her origin, looked at with contempt. Particularly hostile was the Earl's second son named Derek, who openly showed malice towards her and did not miss an opportunity to humiliate her. That day, Isabella just wanted peace and quiet. She tried to walk past, but Derek grabbed her hand, not letting her leave peacefully. He accused her of madness, said that she didn't even talk to her brother, as if she had completely lost all shame and respect. Isabella replied that there was nothing and could not be anything in common between them, and if he wanted peace, let him go. She was too tired. He didn't understand how she could be so cold and rude. In his eyes, she was acting defiant and too independent. Isabella reminded him that as the older sister, she had the right to distance herself. Derek added angrily that she had become arrogant after her engagement to the Duke. He said that nothing had changed in her, the same low character. Then she asked, "Why does he think so? Because she tries." If Isabella marries the Duke, she will become the only Duchess of Honor in the entire vast empire, and even the most noble persons will take her into account. Meanwhile, Ivan, who had not even received the official title of Count, continued to stand in front of her as if his position allowed him to look at Isabella as an equal. After these humiliating words, he simply took and pushed her, throwing her straight onto the cold ground, without feeling a drop of regret for his actions. Isabella fell down the stairs and woke up in her room lying on a soft bed under a thick blanket. The castle was quiet. It seemed that she really had fallen down the steps, but she still couldn't understand how it had happened at all. Her head was in confusion. Annie, her maid, ran up and joyfully exclaimed that her mistress had finally woken up and immediately began asking if she was in any pain. Isabella replied that she felt an ache in her body, and the maid immediately clarified that Master Derek had pushed her down the stairs and the butler had seen it. This girl was her personal maid. Isabella was very angry with her brother for what happened and could hardly restrain herself from calling him an offensive word. Meanwhile, Annie brought the lady some painkillers. The court physician said that it would be better for her not to get up and it would be wise if she had a good rest. The maid also reported that a letter had arrived in the morning, and on the envelope was the coat of arms of the Duchy of Adelhart. It was from Lucifer. In the letter, Lucifer said that the teacher said that if they want to invite guests, they must definitely send invitations as is customary in high society. This time he promised to make even more delicious cookies and also brew some aromatic and fragrant jasmine tea for her. He wrote that he really hoped for her arrival and that he would wait even if he had to send the letter again just so that she would come. Isabella even wanted to cry from such a tender, sincere letter. She did not expect such warmth from him. She suddenly remembered how she first met her stepmother, and for some reason this memory especially touched her now. Isabella grew up without a mother from her earliest childhood. Her image was unknown to her, like an emptiness in her heart. But that day, her stepmother gave her a wonderful gift, and the girl was so delighted that she could not hold back her tears. Her stepmother actually seemed to her like a bright angel who came out of nowhere to fill her loneliness with light. Every day, Isabella lived happily enjoying a peaceful sleep, but one day everything changed dramatically, and her life was no longer the same. One day, Isabella heard that she had suggested to Ivan that he leave the girl with relatives because their child would soon be born, and she would not be able to look after her constantly. Her thoughts were also occupied with another option, sending the girl to a school with online education because there were good dormitories and living conditions there. Isabella understood perfectly well how painful and bitter this situation was and did not want to give the girl false hopes that could only do harm in the end. So she wrote Ivan a reply letter and asked the maid to send it back to the Duchy family so that he would receive her message without delay. Besides, Isabella thought about her brother, whom she considered a real bastard, and could not calmly relate to his actions. Her brother clearly found everything that had happened the day before amusing, and this only added fuel to the fire of her worries and discontent. At times, Isabella thought about first taking revenge on her brother for all this, and then breaking off her engagement with Ivan in order to break with the past once and for all. However, if she decided to break off the engagement, this count would probably soon try to marry her off to someone else again, so first she had to make sure that she was safe away from her father's influence. Isabella had the money to resolve this issue, but first she had to find contact with the Information Guild, the only reliable ally in this matter. The boy was very happy when he saw that Isabella had answered him with a letter, and his mood immediately improved after a long wait. He said that he could read the letter on his own, so he didn't need help, and he eagerly began reading. He was really interested to know what Isabella had written in her letter, asking how he was doing and what was going on in his life. Isabella was very grateful that the young master invited her to start again, because she could like a rare guest come to tea, despite the fact that the time was far from suitable for such meetings. The boy told the nanny that he was a married child, and therefore, in his opinion, his father and Mrs. Isabella did not feel any special love or tenderness for him. He believed that it was because of his presence that they decided to break off the engagement, but the nanny was sure that he had misunderstood the situation and did not understand where the boy got such ridiculous thoughts from, because the owner cared about him very much. The boy expressed interest in whether he would eventually be able to persuade the lady to stay and change her mind about the engagement, since it was important and significant for him. The nanny said that of course the young master could try to do everything possible to win her favor and change the current situation, and supported him in this desire. The boy then decided that he would like to buy a gift for the lady so that she would feel cared for, and perhaps soften her attitude towards him. He was sure that there are no people who do not like to receive gifts because it is always a way to show your sympathy and attention to another person. If he gives her something special, she will remember him and the attention he tried to show her, even when the situation seemed hopeless. At this time, Isabella was looking for the way to the Information Guild building, trying not to get lost and get there as quickly as possible to complete her important task. She put on her robe and suddenly heard a familiar voice that made her freeze in place as if foreshadowing something. It was the young Master Lucifer who was there with his maid and talking to her carefully, following her every word. The maid told him not to rush, tried to protect him from rash actions, but suddenly the young master fell, which attracted Isabella's attention. Isabella decided that this incident did not mean much to her, and it was not worth spending too much energy and emotion on it. She decided not to worry and just pass by because her goal was much more important, and there was no point in being distracted by such trifles. But in reality, she couldn't just do it that way, because something about this incident touched her soul, made her stop and pay attention. She approached the young gentleman and quietly asked if everything was okay, addressing him with care and attention, trying to understand if he needed help. He was very glad to see Madame Isabella because her appearance filled his heart with hope and made him feel that he was not alone in this world. The stone tiles on the roads were cold and damp, so he had to get up quickly and go back to be sure to see a doctor and not make his condition worse. But the boy insisted that he would not leave because he came here with one purpose: to buy a special gift for Isabella, which he had long wanted to give her. Isabella couldn't understand what kind of gifts they were talking about because there were too many other worries and concerns in her head. The most important thing for her was the boy's health, and this was what worried her most at that moment when they walked together along the road. Then the boy became a little embarrassed, but still said that if so, then they could go on a mission where they would help both him and her. He expressed a desire to have tea with her, to spend time together, and share what was accumulated in his heart. Isabella smiled at him, but when they got there, she was in complete shock and couldn't believe that she didn't have the slightest time for such tea parties. Her schedule was so busy and filled with important things to do that she simply couldn't find a minute for it. Nevertheless, he said many pleasant words to her, and she was immensely grateful to him for his attention and care, which she felt were sincere. At the same time, Isabella noted that she was very interested in understanding why he so strongly wanted to invite her to tea right now at such a difficult time for her. The guy didn't answer directly that he actually wanted to ask her to become his mother, and it was a very important and personal desire for him. Isabella didn't even know how to react correctly and what to say in response to such an unexpected confession. She told him that she was very sorry, but she could not be his mother no matter how much he wanted her to be. He did not understand the reasons for such a refusal and assumed that the whole point was that he was an illegitimate child, and this created barriers between them. But Isabella explained that the real reason was completely different and had nothing to do with his status as an illegitimate son. At that moment, the Duke came and asked Lady Valine what was going on here and why everyone was so tense. The boy was scared when he saw his father because his appearance always caused him anxiety and inner fear. His reaction was quite understandable and explainable because in front of him stood a person with whom he had a difficult relationship. The point is that Isabella, being an illegitimate daughter, was able to become engaged to the Duke thanks to a secret that few knew and which changed a lot in their destinies, which the Count was able to drive into the very corner, leaving the Duke with no chance of salvation or maneuver. And it was this discovery that destroyed all ideas about Lucifer. He was not Ivan's biological son, a name that was strictly forbidden to be spoken in the Adelhart family, shrouded in mystery and fear. The eldest daughter of the former Duke of Adelhart, Julia, was Ivan's older sister and had her own path full of struggle and pain. Ivan suffered bullying and cruelty from his father, who under the guise of education wanted to make him an ideal successor. His sister always assured him that everything was fine and that Ivan was not to blame for anything, trying to support him in difficult times. He saw Julia as the only person close to him in his family who truly understood his pain and loneliness. As time went on, they both entered different academies, which became a new stage in their lives, full of changes and challenges. Julia left Ivan to escape her cruel father and start a new life far from home where she could breathe freely. Ivan felt the baptism of pain and disappointment, but gradually growing up forced him to accept reality as it is. He couldn't understand what exactly was going on around him and why his sister was covered in blood, leaving him confused and afraid. It was impossible for Ivan to believe that their father was capable of such things, violence and destruction of the family from within. Julia only smiled in response, silently accepting this pain, but the bullying and persecution did not stop even after she entered the academy. The Duke attacked the pregnant Julia, who did not yet know who the father of her unborn child was, remaining completely in the dark. Ivan, knowing the whole truth, always stood guard and protected Julia from the Duke's rage, which earned her deep gratitude. She appreciated his support and protection, especially because he cared not only for her, but also for the future baby inside her. During childbirth, Julia tragically died, leaving behind pain and emptiness in the hearts of her loved ones. To prevent further suffering and save the child, Ivan adopted baby Lucifer, making him his own son. After these events, Ivan stopped looking for Lucifer's biological father, focusing on raising his son and his family. A year ago, the Duke was called away on urgent business when the young master suddenly suffered a violent attack that shocked everyone around him. The Duke was in complete shock because he claimed that he had never had attacks of this kind before. This surprised him and gave him no peace. Isabella could not understand what exactly was happening and why a strange symbol appeared on the Duke's chest, which seemed mysterious and frightening to her. It seemed that this was not an ordinary fever at all, but a much more serious phenomenon, as if someone had cursed him, and now this curse was making itself felt. All the signs pointed to a pattern, a curse that seemed to run in their family for generations, and the Duke began to suspect that he had some idea about it. He delved into the mystery, discovering that the curse was linked to Lucifer's biological father, and little was known about him other than mysterious rumors. Over time, the information about the curse became more and more vague and obscure, as if someone was trying to hide the truth or forget about it. One day, Count Valen came to the Duke and noticed that he seemed to already guess the truth and was ready to share important information. The Count hinted that he was talking about Lucifer's biological parents, whose secret still remains hidden from everyone. The Duke asked in surprise what exactly was being discussed, because he had always considered Lucifer his legitimate and natural son, and did not understand why such a topic was arising. However, the man only smiled, as if he knew more than he was saying, and continued his story mysteriously and confidently. The Count revealed that Lucifer's real mother was the Duke's older sister, and the story itself was much more complicated than it seemed. He added that the platinum-haired man everyone saw was actually Lucifer's biological father, which left the Duke even more shocked. At the same time, Count Valen offered the Duke a lucrative agreement that could help keep all these secrets a secret and avoid a scandal. He said that if the Duke agreed to marry his daughter Isabella, then together they could keep this information from the public and maintain order. However, if the Duke refuses, the secret will soon become known to many, and the public will not be in the dark about these events for long. Even Isabella asked to break off the engagement in exchange for information about Lucifer's biological father, but the Duke feared that their meeting could have undesirable consequences. Lucifer explained to his father that it was not Mrs. Isabella's fault, since it was he who invited her into their affairs, taking full responsibility upon himself. The Duke demanded that Lucifer return to his room, wanting to get away from this difficult and confusing situation. However, Isabella insisted that the younger Duke not leave because she needed to discuss all this personally with the older Duke and find a way out. The Duke asked in surprise how Isabella was trying to explain to him what was happening and what was really going on in their family and around Lucifer. Isabella said she had met the younger Duke by chance in the city center and had accepted his invitation to have tea together. It had been an unexpected encounter that quickly developed into a conversation. She also stressed that she wanted to apologize if this situation had somehow offended him or caused unpleasant feelings, because she did not seek conflict and tried to behave respectfully. Isabella noted that if her presence or goals make him uncomfortable, she is willing to leave so as not to create tension and worsen the situation between them. Suddenly, the Duke noticed something unusual on her hand and asked her to stop to take a closer look at it, because such wounds could not go unnoticed. He asked who had caused her such pain, believing it to be her father Valens, who he thought might have been the cause of such wounds. But Isabella replied that, in fact, the wound was caused by a completely different person, and it was far from her father as the Duke had assumed. The Duke then placed his hand on the wound, trying to comfort her and show support, but Isabella said that it was not something to worry about, especially when they were on the verge of divorce, and other problems seemed more important. However, the Duke felt that this was precisely what he should worry about, because he had not yet accepted her explanation and felt that the wound symbolized deeper problems. He understood that she would soon become his wife, and that is why he considered himself entitled to ask such questions and demand the truth in order to understand who he was getting involved with. Isabella didn't even think about the fact that they were together. She was immersed in her thoughts and experiences, not imagining that their relationship had already become serious. She had simply fallen down the stairs the day before, so she asked the Duke not to worry in vain, and to put his worries aside since her injury was accidental and minor. He looked at her hand again carefully and said that when she was ready, it was time to come back, hinting that care and time would help her cope with the pain. The Duke asked Logan to learn more about the people in her family and their relationships in order to better understand the situation and draw the right conclusions. He couldn't help but notice the wound. It looked like a mark of violence, and it worried him, making him think that there was something more behind it. If the Duke was right, then he couldn't just ignore this situation and was going to figure it out in order to protect Isabella and understand the truth. Isabella asked if Ivan could drive to Courtney Street so that she could get out more easily. The coachman replied that his master was going to take the lady to the county, but Isabella tried to explain that she had important business there. She only asked to stop at the place she needed to do her business and do it as quickly as possible. After a while, the coachman reported that they had arrived, and Isabella began looking for the building where the Information Guild was located. She walked through the old doors, hoping that this was where she needed to be. Inside, she noticed a few guys sitting at a table, tapped the surface, and asked for a glass of Ascent, adding that she wanted ice with lemon. Ascent was a popular drink of the Empire, and in this tavern it was considered special and served only according to certain rules. In this tavern, the Ascent served as a password to enter the Northern Information Guild, and it was ordered only by those who were initiated into the secrets. A man approached one of the visitors and asked if Isabella knew the meaning of this order and what it symbolized. The lady confidently replied that she understood everything perfectly well and knew what this gesture meant. She knocked on the table twice and ordered a glass of Ascent with lemon and ice, thus confirming her intentions. This method served as a signal that she wanted to meet with the leader of the Information Guild in person and discuss important issues. 13 years after Ivan's death, the situation has changed significantly, and a lot of time has passed since then. Lucifer, feeling betrayed and forgotten, decided to tell the Information Guild the truth about his father and reveal long-held secrets. This information has caused accusations and controversy, but it is thanks to it that Lucifer has developed a special complex relationship with the guild leader Sumbiol. This alone was enough to build trust, but Isabella had one specific reason why she wanted to hire a Sierro. The whole point was that the Information Guild had a habit of exchanging only information and not people or things. If Isabella had any information that might interest the guild, she was confident that she could negotiate with Sumbiol directly. She understood that such contact would give her a significant advantage and allow her to receive help at the right moment. The man said that he had already contacted his boss and therefore asked her to wait a little, promising that everything would be fine. In the meantime, he suggested that she drink some water to pass the time and feel more relaxed. By the way, the aroma that emanated from this waiter seemed surprisingly familiar and somewhat evocative to Isabella. There are things that are very difficult to find even for a lot of money, and one of them is the rare herb Lysara, which has a powerful calming effect. The man asked her what exactly she did and why she needed this rare herb, expecting to hear a convincing answer. She replied that there was no longer any reason to delay and wait, because the right time had already come. Isabella also said that she knew for sure that it was he, Mr. Sumbiol, who was standing in front of her and talking. The man was clearly surprised by this confession and asked how she could so quickly and accurately understand who he really was. Isabella said that she heard that Mr. Sumbiol's younger sister was seriously ill, and that was why he constantly smoked Lysara grass, as it had a calming effect. He always has a pleasant aroma, and on his index finger there is a ring with an unusual pattern. This ring is a special artifact that can change the appearance of the person who wears it. Mr. Sumbiel smiled and admitted that it was indeed interesting and he thought it was worth talking to the person who told it. He carefully removed the ring from his finger and asked what he owed to the elegant lady who had shown such an interest in him. Sumbiel is the head of the Sierra Guild. He explained that she asked him to exchange the jewelry for money. She needs to find one woman, a doctor with red hair and green eyes, who can help in the treatment of Sumbiel's younger sister. This woman lives in the capital or its environs and was developing a cure for a sick girl. The woman's name was Erin Rauner. Sumbiel agreed to help and asked how much jewelry she would need to exchange. They said that those jewels would be enough for the search, but Aria intends to continue cooperation in the future. For this reason, she said that in exchange for help, she was ready to share knowledge on how to cure Sumbiel's younger sister. Aria has suffered from a serious illness since birth, which no one has been able to cure, yet so Sumbiel does not understand how she can claim the opposite. The title of the novel is Aria of Light. The main character in it was the younger sister of Shumbiulia, a girl with a difficult fate but with a heart full of inner light. Aria was fragile in body, her health was weak from childhood, but at the same time, her soul remained the warmest and kindest of all those she had ever met. Lucifer lost the ability to trust other people after the betrayal committed by Isabella's father, which destroyed his faith and peace forever. But despite this, he was able to open his heart to the soft and bright Aria. The divine power that once completely absorbed her was the very light that could heal his curse. Aria said that Lucifer should brew a decoction of Talana flowers and give it to his sister. These flowers grow in the distant kingdom of Russia and increase the strength of the body. He did not understand why he should believe her, but the Lord informed him that he had to make this decision himself, to believe or remain in doubt. Until her words about the healing flower of the Talana are confirmed, Lucifer will not be able to provide her with any of the important information she has been waiting for. Isabella replied that she understood everything. It would be really good if he did not waste time and started looking for that girl as soon as possible. After all, if he helps Erin and she creates a cure for Aria, then it will be much easier for Isabella to win the trust of Sumbiel himself and his inner circle. Lucifer agreed to help and asked if Isabella needed anything else before he began the task. Then Isabella remembered another important detail and immediately said that she would need one more thing that she had previously forgotten to mention. It's a good thing she didn't fall into enemy hands. It could have cost her too much, especially considering the current situation in the castle. After she had finished her business, the maid reported to her that the time had come. Everything was ready and there was no time to delay. The lady announced that she would be arriving any minute, but at that moment, the father, hearing this, sharply remarked that she was already late, as if trying to emphasize her mistake and cause tension. He reacted to what was happening with restraint, as if his mood depended on a multitude of little things that, as Isabella believed, should not play such a role in this conversation. He glanced at her and calmly admitted that he did not understand why she was looking at him with such an expression, as if she expected something unusual from him or suspected something. Isabella, slightly confused, replied that she was simply lost in thought and mechanically stared at her plate, not noticing how her gaze had stopped on the food. The father turned to Isabella, but she only looked at him silently in surprise, raising her eyebrows as if she did not expect that she would be addressed again at such a moment. The man said that he heard that she had visited the mansion that used to belong to her ex-husband yesterday, and it was as if he deliberately said this out loud to test her reaction. He then coldly asked her why she had decided not to inform him of her visit, as if she considered it a sign of disrespect. It would have been easier for Isabella to lie, but she answered reservedly that she had asked the Duke to break off their engagement, unable to hide it any longer. Then the father, not believing his ears, asked again with irritation what exactly she had just said, as if he hoped that he had misheard. The girl calmly but firmly confirmed that she had indeed asked the Duke to break off the engagement, and added that she had just been about to share this decision with everyone. At that very moment, without saying a word, her father suddenly jumped up from his seat and slapped her across the face with fury, as if all the accumulated irritation had poured out in one single gesture. After this, he coldly said that Isabella should immediately stop getting on his nerves with her stubborn behavior and ridiculous attempts to change something. He added that he intended to discuss what was happening with the Duke, but at the same time stressed that there would be no breakup of the marriage, and there was no point in even hoping for it. The girl had to come to terms with the fact that she was reminded that she had no right to decide her own destiny, and any of her wishes would not be taken into account. As Isabella walked down the long corridor, her brother, seeing the expression on her face, snorted and declared that she had definitely gone crazy from this whole situation. In response to his caustic remark, Isabella calmly asked if that was really all he wanted to say, or if he had any more complaints. He frowned and asked with a grin, did she really hope to hear anything more from him, as if his opinion still mattered to her? She replied that, for example, he could have said a simple sorry, or at least asked how she felt after everything that had happened. Instead, he just chuckled lazily and mockingly stated that she was still spouting the same stupid nonsense, unable to let go of her illusions. He also noted that her job was not to wander around the house like a ghost, but to finally start living like a noble wife. And at that moment, Isabella understood completely. He was not going to ask for forgiveness or admit his guilt. It was too obvious in his words. He stated that he would never in his life ask her for forgiveness, considering it a sign of weakness and unfair to himself. But despite his stubbornness, she still decided to give him a chance to change, even if it was small, hoping for change. She used a small jar of liquid which she poured directly onto his leg, as if testing his reaction and fortitude. She has previously admitted that she needs someone to fall down the stairs every now and then, causing minor but permanent injuries. This request seemed simple in comparison with the price the lady had set. She was not demanding the impossible. He thought for a long time, after which he began to explain the possible actions, but she already felt guilty knowing that she would have to cause pain. He agreed to give her this very bottle, realizing that the choice had already been made, and there was no point in retreating. Isabella was determined to leave this place as soon as possible, not wanting to remain in a dangerous situation. Logan conveyed a message to the gentleman stating that the investigation had yielded its first tangible results. From the outside, it seemed as if the mother was caring for her daughter, but inside the mansion, things were different. The girl was simply ignored. Moreover, at one time the Countess even mocked her. Under the guise of training, she starved her and kept her under strict house arrest. There were also cases of physical violence, although they were not advertised, and none of the servants dared to intervene, but the Duchess would not have considered all this impossible. If there had been no scar, where would it have come from? It remained a mystery. In the evening, he decided to stay in the Count's mansion, as if trying to restore in his memory the details that he had previously missed. The servant asked why the master had suddenly decided to go there, and he replied that he wanted to check something personally. In fact, he could have simply approached the lady and asked her directly about it, but he chose a roundabout way. He didn't know what to do if she started rejecting him before everything was decided. The thought confused him, made him feel strangely anxious and unsure. The very fact that he was doing everything so hastily without a plan puzzled him. He was shocked by himself and his spontaneous determination. He felt as if all the anchors inside him had come loose. It was becoming increasingly difficult for him to understand his own actions and true motives. Everyone around tried to stop the Duke, but even their combined efforts were of no avail. He was too determined and did not listen to anyone. The butler politely explained that Lady Isabella was not feeling well at the moment, and politely suggested that they reschedule the visit for another day when she was better. But the Duke ignored the butler's words. He was determined that he would not delay the visit and would insist on meeting immediately. Her condition suddenly worsened only this morning. Before that, she seemed cheerful, friendly, and in excellent spirits. Despite all the warnings, the gentleman said he couldn't wait. He needed to talk to the lady now, otherwise everything would be meaningless. At that time, Isabella was in her room and there was chaos all around. Everything was in disarray, as if she had no control over anything. Anyway, she had recently used a potion that could have been the reason for the sudden deterioration or the strange behavior. Less than an hour later, word came that Mr. Derrick had fallen down the stairs. The servants were bustling about, confused and frightened by what was happening. Isabella tried to look concerned. She asked if he was seriously hurt, as if hoping it was nothing serious. The servants said he had broken his arm. Everyone was shocked. First the mistress's illness, and now the master's accident. Isabella smiled faintly and said that they must just be unlucky. She tried to remain calm, but there was a hint of irony in her voice. Isabella could finally not see Ivan for at least a day or two, and this made her feel a little calmer inside, even as if it became easier to breathe, like a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. She decided to pretend to be sick today, to say that she was unwell and just lie down all day so as not to see or hear anyone. She had hardly laid down when someone began knocking on the door very insistently, as if he was not going to wait a minute despite her intention to rest. She understood who it could be, reluctantly stood up and ordered that they not disturb her again without a good reason, especially if they brought some more nonsense. It turned out to be the maid whom Isabella had asked not to disturb, but she babbled that unexpected guests had arrived and everything was urgent. Isabella was surprised and frowned, not understanding what the maid was talking about and why all the fuss in the morning. She quickly added that the guest was very important, and even mentioned that after the ball no one expected such visits, especially so early. Then she said that it was Duke Adelhart himself, and Isabella's insides immediately went cold at that name. His arrival without any warning was very strange and caused concern, especially after recent events. The maid explained that the Duke had come to discuss breaking off the engagement and demanded to meet in person. Isabella had a bruise on her cheek from where her father had hit her, and she couldn't understand how she could possibly show herself to anyone looking like that. So she conveyed that she was not feeling well and was not physically prepared for a conversation, especially of this kind. She asked that they tell the Duke that the meeting was possible another day, not today when she was in such a state. However, a few minutes later, the maid returned again and reported with alarm that the refusal had not worked. The Duke insisted on the meeting and was now waiting for Isabella in the drawing room, not wanting to leave until he had spoken to her. Then Isabella realized that she had no choice, and no matter what she said, she would not be able to avoid this meeting. She called Annie, her maid, and told her to start making preparations immediately to get her in order. With the help of makeup, they managed to at least slightly hide the mark of the blow so as not to put everything on display. The maid quietly approached Isabella and informed her that everything was ready and all that was left was to wait for the right moment for everything to begin without unnecessary fuss and panic. But even despite the preparation, Isabella could not understand how to act because the mark from the blow on her face was too noticeable and striking. If the Duke sees a bruise, he will certainly become angry, which means that everything could end worse than anyone could have imagined or expected. Isabella ordered her maid to bring her hat with the widest brim possible to hide the mark on her face, and not to raise any unnecessary questions from the Duke. A few minutes later, she left the room to meet the Duke, trying to act confident as if nothing strange had happened. But the butler politely said that she had better return to her room because it would be more correct and safer in the present circumstances. Isabella did not agree. After all, the Duke himself had previously made it clear that he was waiting for her and did not want to see anyone else at this moment. However, the servant explained that the Duke would still talk to another lady instead of her, and that person turned out to be her stepmother. When Isabella heard this, she immediately understood that they were talking about her stepmother, the very woman she considered the most dangerous in the house. She decided not to waste time and make her move because to miss such a moment would mean giving up without a fight and losing influence. Or maybe it was even better that things turned out this way. Now she had no reason to return and she could act according to her own discretion. After all, it was impossible to allow the Duke to wait for her too long. In such matters, time was of the essence and cost one's reputation. As Isabella approached the room, she heard her stepmother saying ingratiatingly that the Duke must understand that they had already discussed everything, and that she felt well. Perhaps the stepmother said the meeting should be rescheduled. Wouldn't it be better to wait until another day when the situation would be calmer? With such a feigned tone and hypocritical gentleness, she tried to maintain a decent image in front of the Duke and other nobles. If Isabella ruins her reputation in front of influential people, the consequences could be catastrophic for both of them. When the stepmother noticed that someone was entering, she said irritably that she had already asked not to let anyone in and not to interfere with the conversation. Isabella even became curious about what the woman's expression would be like when she saw who exactly had entered the room. The lady felt real horror as soon as her gaze fell on Isabella, who appeared in the hall. She did not expect to see her here at such an inopportune moment. The Duke looked genuinely pleased to see his mistress appear, as if he had breathed a sigh of relief, rejoicing at her long-awaited arrival. Isabella bowed her head, apologizing and explaining that she was tidying herself up since the Duke's arrival was so sudden and had not been foreseen by her. She had difficulty understanding why the Duke had not bothered to warn her of his visit in advance. This seemed to her at least strange and even offensive. He suddenly asked her why she was wearing such an inappropriate wide-brimmed hat, to which she simply replied that it was just part of her outfit. However, he came closer, took off her hat with a sharp movement, and unceremoniously threw it on the floor, not even paying attention to Isabella's confusion. His voice turned cold as he asked if that accidental fall was the cause of the noticeable wound on her face. The Count's wife intervened, trying to smooth things over, and explained that Isabella was often clumsy and had most likely simply made a mistake. But the Duke insisted that he had asked to tell him only the truth. Was it really a fall, or was there something else hidden behind it? The lady tried to understand what he was getting at, and it became clear that he wanted to find out if someone had hit Isabella despite all the excuses. She was at a loss to understand why his anger was growing more and more furious, as if he knew more than he was willing to say out loud. In the end, he said with restraint that the wound was obvious, and no matter how you looked at it, it was indeed the result of a blow. So he moved on to the most important thing and asked who dared to raise a hand against his bride because this was already a personal insult. The lady in fear began to swear that no one had touched Isabella with a finger, trying to convince the Duke of the complete absence of violence. And Isabella herself hastened to intervene, begging the Duke to believe her. She said that the reason was not the blow at all, but something else. He paused for a moment as if struggling with himself, and then firmly declared that he would not allow his bride to remain in this place. He soon added sullenly that he was going to take the lady to the Adelhart estate, immediately not wanting to delay even a minute longer. Isabella was completely confused. Her thoughts were racing. She couldn't believe what was happening and didn't know how to react to it. When he took her hand, she was still under the impression, despite her confusion, she obediently went with him, packing her things in a hurry. They walked out together without saying anything more, and headed towards his carriage, which Isabella got into, still not fully understanding what was happening. Once settled inside, Isabella had difficulty collecting her thoughts and asked the Duke what exactly he was allowing himself to do at the moment. To her surprise, he immediately replied that he had the same question for her, requiring an explanation. He was not going to put up with such an attitude, and did not consider it possible to simply turn a blind eye to her actions. The Duke could not understand why, in such a difficult situation, instead of supporting her, she demanded that the engagement be broken. Isabella recalled that despite how she was treated in her home, she had previously told him not to worry. The gentleman asked her a direct question, whether she really believed that they were now strangers to each other, and she confirmed this without hesitation. Then he gently but firmly reminded her that from the moment of engagement, she became part of the Adelhart family, and breaking the engagement was impossible. As for her personal affairs, he considers himself entitled to interfere, because it now concerns him too. In response to his words, Isabella screamed, not understanding why all this was happening so abruptly and without warning. And he only coldly noted that all this would definitely happen again if she continued to behave like this. Isabella felt that since her engagement, her position had changed. Now she had become part of the Duke's family, even if she herself was not ready for it. She still remembered that he himself had not wanted this wedding at all in the first place. Isabella noted this with a cold internal sting. When she reminded him of this, he fell silent for a moment and simply turned away, as if he did not know how to properly respond to the reproach. Then he finally said that he was not going to force her to do anything, but he would like her to stay in the mansion at least for a while. However, she did not understand why he did not show any concern, because even his relative, a holy man, would have acted differently. Besides, he doesn't hide her somewhere secret or dangerous. Everything looks quite decent if you don't get into feelings. He merely offered to move her to another mansion where she could rest in a calmer and more secure environment. In the new place, she was met by Frank, who served as a butler here, and he looked like a rather polite and knowledgeable person. The Duke addressed him, noting that the lady would remain here for an indefinite period, and asked him to show her special attention. Frank bowed and said that he would take her to a prepared room where she could settle in and recover from the journey. The Duke then informed her that he would introduce her to a family physician who would help her with any wounds or ailments that she might need. Isabella declined, saying it was not necessary and she felt well enough to do without help. The doctor explained that this was an order from his master, and he would again be pleased if she abandoned her intentions. In the end, she still agreed to go for it, albeit with some doubts inside. Then he will ask that she be well taken care of after the procedure. She was probably in a lot of pain, and he asked if she was experiencing any other discomfort. She replied that everything was fine. In fact, there were no more problems. The doctor was delighted and said that if something happened, she should definitely call him for help. Isabella thought about her next steps because she didn't know this new world at all. It was dangerous to just leave without a plan of where to go and where to turn. After meeting with Julius and collecting the necessary amount, she intended to leave the family estate, but now uncertainty and doubts about my plans have settled in my soul. She wondered if Lucifer would be able to receive a good upbringing and care if she left. Another question that arose was who would become the successor and how this important issue would be resolved. When they started talking about Lucifer's biological father, it became clear that somewhere there was a way to lift his curse and change his destiny. However, she did not think it was right for the impossible girl to live with a strange man and child. It seemed strange and wrong to her. Suddenly, someone knocked on her door and she allowed them to enter, not expecting to see a familiar face at that moment. Lucifer entered the room, walking through the door with a light gait and a calm expression on his face. He immediately asked what was wrong with her cheek, noticing a slight redness or mark that made him uneasy. The girl replied that nothing terrible had happened, and there was no need to worry, everything was fine and nothing serious. Then she asked the gentleman what he wanted in her room in order to understand why Lucifer came here. The guy replied that he just wanted to take a walk with her and spend time in the fresh air and pleasant company. The lady was surprised by such an initiative, but Lucifer did not lose his head and asked if she still wanted to go for a walk with him. She agreed without hesitation, explaining that she would be happy to keep them company and go out with them. Together they went out into the garden where a calm atmosphere reigned, and the gentle summer sun illuminated the greenery around. She noticed a trefoil growing there, and became interested in this simple but unusual plant in the grass. The boy did not quite understand what a shamrock was, thinking that it was connected with rabbits or some other sign of nature. The girl explained that this plant is often confused, but in fact it is a common three-leaf clover, a common plant. She added that sometimes you can find a rare four-leaf clover which, according to legend, makes wishes come true and brings good luck. The guy admitted that he would like to know where exactly he could find such a magical clover in order to test this tale on himself. The lady said that no matter how hard she tried to find him, she could not achieve results and the search was unsuccessful. He asked her what wish she wanted to make, and the girl smiled as if she secretly believed that it was something important and secret. At that moment, a maid approached them and quietly reminded them that it was already time for dinner and everyone should go to the table. The girl suggested to the young gentleman that it was time for them to return because the evening was drawing to an end and there was no point in waiting any longer. Despite this, he decided to take another look at the clover as if hoping to see something unusual or important for himself in it. During dinner, the girl felt fear taking hold of her more and more, and it seemed that she was about to lose control and lose consciousness. The gentleman thought that the reason for her condition was that she didn't like the food or that she wasn't used to such dishes. The girl admitted that she was simply not very hungry, and then the boy turned to his father, noting that now the lady would probably stay to live with them. The father replied that for now it was only temporary, and he had not yet made any final decisions on this matter. The guy said that if the lady really goes to the clover she spoke of, then her wish will definitely come true and everything will change. He shouldn't have said those words out loud because the consequences could have been unpredictable and undesirable. She explained that it was just a saying, and that Clover was not actually capable of granting wishes as many people thought from old legends. So he had to promise that he would definitely look for me, that he would not abandon this thought and would continue the search no matter what. The lady looked out the window and saw that it was raining very heavily outside. The drops were breaking against the glass noisily and without stopping. In such bad weather, someone was still in the garden, which was usually empty, and this thought caused alarm inside her. At first, she thought that there was no one there, but when she saw what was happening, she was simply in complete shock from what she saw. She was terribly worried because there were little Lucifers there, and this vision struck her to the depths of her soul. She ran out of the house and saw Lucifer lying on the ground unconscious and vulnerable on this rainy day. Without understanding at all what he was doing here, she wanted only one thing: for him to wake up and come to his senses quickly. She couldn't believe what was happening because she asked him not to look for her, knowing that it was a very difficult and dangerous matter. She firmly said that the clover is just a symbol and it is not capable of fulfilling real wishes, nothing more. But he said he still wanted to try, despite the doubts and difficulties that might come his way. He admitted that he had indeed found what he was looking for, and it changed the whole situation between them. She helped carry Lucifer to the mansion, trying her best to make him feel better and get help. The doctor assured him that he shouldn't worry too much. The temperature would drop, he would fall asleep, and then he would feel much better. The Duke said that it was already late and therefore suggested that the lady return home and rest so as not to exhaust herself. Isabella said that she was still watching Lucifer, monitoring his condition, and would like to spend time alone with him to talk calmly. She expressed a desire to be alone with the boy in order to pay more attention to him and understand how he felt after everything that had happened. Lucifer began to gradually open his eyes and thought that there was a doctor next to him who was monitoring his health and helping him recover. Isabella explained that she was the one nearby and asked the boy to rest to gain strength and not overexert himself. He replied that he had already had a good rest and would like to tell her something important that he had been keeping to himself for a long time. Isabella suggested that he might have been looking for a 4-leaf clover, a symbol of good luck and hope that might mean something to him. The boy was happy when he saw the clover because he thought that he had lost it a long time ago and would never find it again. He believed that the piece of paper had been lost during the incident with his ingot, and he was very upset about it. Isabella noted that she had asked him not to look for the clover, considering it an empty fuss and a stupid hope since wishes from a leaf do not come true. But the boy insisted that the lady really wanted to find this clover, and it was for her that he tried to find it no matter what. She realized that he was looking for the clover not for himself, but to give it to her as a sign of his care and attention. He confirmed that it was true and that his wish was for her to make some secret wish and have it come true. Isabella could not understand why he was doing this, because she herself did not consider herself worthy of such care and love. She doubted herself, thought that she was not golden at all, and did not deserve such feelings, so she asked why he decided to do exactly that. The boy replied that he wanted not his wish to come true, but the wish of the lady, because her happiness was more important to him than anything else in the world. Isabella was shocked by such a confession, because she did not expect to hear such words and feelings from him. Her main desire was to find a real family, one that would support and accept her as she was. This desire was very important and deeply personal to her. But is she really capable of finding this family? How sincere is she, and is she ready to do everything for it? Or is this just an imposed image? Maybe she just convinced herself that she wanted this so that she wouldn't feel empty inside and find meaning in her life, although in reality, everything is different. The truth is that with Lucifer, she actually had a real chance to fulfill her dream and build the family she had been thinking about for so long. She came to the Duke and boldly addressed him with an important question that had long troubled her heart and mind. The Duke assumed that something serious had happened and suggested that she sit down to discuss everything in a calm, unhurried atmosphere. She said she wanted to talk about marriage and admitted that she had changed her mind about getting a divorce, although this decision was not easy for her and was dictated by new circumstances. However, she had a condition. All questions concerning information about Lucifer's father, the Duke, should discuss only with her and not with his father in order to maintain control over the situation. The Duke was interested in why she had changed her mind, and what exactly her decision to refuse a divorce depended on, expecting to hear compelling reasons. The lady explained that all this was connected with his son. It was he who became the reason for her changes and changed her outlook on many things in their relationship. He asked what exactly his son had done, and she replied that there was a little secret between them that remained only between them, and that explained a lot. She promised that once the truth of this information was confirmed, they would definitely get divorced, leaving no doubt about their intentions. For now, she is determined not to become his wife and to keep her feelings and plans to herself, not to rush into final decisions. The reason she decided to take this step was due to circumstances that affected both of them and created pressure on the situation. Ivan could not betray Lucifer, and Isabella promised to bring Arya to help heal the Duke's son. This was a sufficient condition for the curse to be lifted, after which she could fully regain freedom and peace. He was surprised and asked if she really hated him that much because he was tormented by doubts. The lady replied that this was not at all the case, and such feelings were alien to her. She was ready to explain. She was surprised and admitted that she did not hate him, but wanted to marry for love to the one she chose herself. He asked where she was going to go and what she was planning to do after the divorce. This worried him. The lady said that she would think about it later, but now she wanted to know his opinion and response to the situation. He admitted that he had to think about it since it was easier for him to deal with her than with her father, the Count, but he agreed. Then she suggested formalizing everything in writing, signing the necessary details and recording the agreement. He promised to discuss everything with his assistants, draw up a contract, and suggested postponing the issue of divorce for now. The lady agreed and added that she had another important matter to talk about, no less serious. While he remains her husband, she asks that he pay special attention to Lucifer so that he does not feel forgotten. He would say that this is natural because taking care of a loved one is his direct responsibility and an expression of feelings. It must be understood that if he is truly not indifferent to Lucifer, then he must take this responsibility upon himself. She doesn't understand why, while Lucifer is sick, the father is only concerned about papers and documents and not about his son's condition. She noticed that the doctor assured her that recovery would be accelerated if the patient got a good night's sleep and rested in peace. Therefore, recovery will not go faster if the father is not there, does not support and help the baby. Isabella believes that Lucifer thinks that since his father doesn't come, it means he doesn't care about his fate and health. But in reality, the father is worried he is just too immersed in paperwork and cannot do everything correctly. So don't think that the request is too difficult. He's just not sure that he can handle it without help. The lady promised that she was ready to help him in everything, so that this care would become real and tangible. He first cleared the papers from the table and began to tidy up Lucifer so that everything looked neat and correct. After some time, he finished working on the documents. At this time, Lucifer woke up sitting on a chair, slightly leaning back. The words of his wife came to mind. She was also worried about her son and complained that he could not fill out the necessary paperwork properly. He thought about her words and realized that he had acted too hastily when he saw his son wounded and immediately reacted emotionally. Perhaps it would be better to actually get divorced so as not to create unnecessary problems and not waste time on arguments. But nothing has been decided yet, and no one knows where she will go after the divorce, although it is unclear why she is even thinking about it. He couldn't understand why he cared so much about this situation, why the girl worried him so much and occupied his thoughts. The maid noticed that the master had entered the room, but he asked her to speak more quietly so as not to wake Lucifer by accident. He told her to sit down next to him and told her that all this time he had really hoped that his father would come and help them. The nanny said that she was going to leave so that the owner could rest a little after a busy day and all the worries. He thanked her for her help and loyalty, and she smiled and left the room, leaving him in silence. He looked at his son, who looked a little red from the high fever and seemed weak and vulnerable at this moment. He carefully took the boy's hand, remembering how his sister had once asked him to hold her hand in difficult moments. That day was the last time he held her hand, and it left a deep mark on his memory and soul. Despite everything, he smiled, because in front of him was Julia's son, the continuation of her life and memory. Even if Julia is long gone from them, her son is living proof that she remains close. That day, he made a promise to protect this child, and now he sincerely tried to keep it. He believed that he was doing a good job of this task and fulfilling his promise, not allowing anyone to forget about his family. The child was still afraid of him, and perhaps this fear arose because of their wealth and position in society. Isabella couldn't understand why those around him considered him to be mistaken, because he always acted honestly. Suddenly the boy woke up and was very surprised to see his father next to him, not expecting such a meeting. He was genuinely surprised that his father had come to visit him, and his look confirmed this surprise. He was genuinely delighted, even if the Duke did not share this joy, wondering what was so funny in his words or actions. The guy explained that it was just a mouth next to him, some kind of joke or figurative expression that he himself could not fully explain. This feeling seemed extremely unpleasant to her, as if something wrong was happening that caused anxiety or internal discomfort. He could not understand how one could feel joy just because he was called father, because this word sounded alien and strange to him. He added that it was time for him to go to sleep because it was already late, the night had come into force, and everyone should be in their chambers. Lucifer explained that every time he saw him smile, his chest would get a tickle, and he didn't know why it affected him so much. In addition, information concerning Count Valine, an important person about whom little was said, was posted in this place. However, Isabella was confused by the fact that there was no mention of divorce in the document, although they were going to discuss it later. The Duke explained that he himself had decided not to include this clause in the agreement, assuming that they would indeed discuss it in the future. But Isabella disagreed with this. She believed that something like this should be recorded even if the details were discussed later. Isabella asked at length what exactly they had forgotten to include in the contract and why this clause had not been included in the list of important terms of the agreement in advance. Then she calmly clarified that discussing the terms of the divorce was possible later, but now the main thing was to record it as a mandatory point. After that, she asked how Ivan would react to this, and asked to understand whether he would agree to such a condition or whether it would cause him objections. The Duke, hearing this, confidently confirmed that it was indeed worth including this clause in the agreement, as it would protect the interests of all parties. She mentioned that she had left her maid Annie at the previous house and expressed a desire for her to be brought to the new mansion as soon as possible. Logan, in response to this, promised to contact the Count and deal with this issue, assuring that everything would be done without delay. Preparations for the ceremony will take at least 3 months, during which time they will be able to discuss all the details and possibly make additional requests. Isabella expressed a desire to have a more modest wedding, but Logan noted that given the status of the Adelhart family, such a decision would be inappropriate. He reminded that the Adelhart family has a high position and everything must correspond to its authority, otherwise it will cause public bewilderment. She agreed but stressed that the entire organization would then fall on the Duke's shoulders since she did not intend to actively participate in the preparations. The lady suggested discussing this with the Duke in person. He then cast a spell so that the conversation would remain secret and would not be heard by anyone from the outside. After this, Isabella got straight to the point. She said that she had complete information about Lucifer's biological origin. The prince of the magical kingdom of Cessia turned out to be Rayonel Cessia, a young man with an aristocratic bearing and magical powers inherited from his family. The Duke was truly horrified when he heard that Rayonel was Lucifer's father and tried to find out if it was really true, not believing what he heard. The records stated that Prince Rayonel was famous for his love affairs, and his frivolous nature raised doubts in all who knew him. Rayonel was the illegitimate son of the King of Cessia, and perhaps because of his pride and complicated background, he found himself in the middle of scandals every now and then. This behavior did not suit the king because Rayonel, with his frivolity, undermined the authority of the dynasty and put the family in an unfavorable light. To protect him from gossip, Rayonel was sent to a magic academy where he unexpectedly met Julia, Ivan's sister. The prince was sympathetic to Julia and showed her kindness, but he himself suffered from the status of an illegitimate son and did not feel free. He sincerely feared that a relationship with him could harm Julia, put her at risk, or cause public censure. It was for this reason that she kept their relationship a strict secret, protecting both herself and him from possible consequences. The only person who was trusted with this secret was Count Vanin, an old friend who could keep silent. But the main problem turned out to be the ancient curse of the Cessia family, which unexpectedly passed on to Rayonel, manifesting itself in him. After this, the dark curse was passed on to Lucifer, which only confirmed the relationship between him and Rayonel. The strangest thing about this story was that upon learning of Julia's pregnancy, Rayonel made no attempt to intervene. Rayonel went to the capital to undergo the mandatory session and obtain permission to practice medicine as required by the court order. But he never returned back. Everything changed after meeting Julia, after which he felt for the first time what true love means. Why he disappeared after that, no one knew. To understand, it was worth reading the letter to the end, but the last lines seemed to disappear. The Duke, noticing the oddities in Isabella's story, promised to find out what exactly happened and why Rayanel disappeared so suddenly. Isabella at that moment thought that it was worth visiting Lucifer because she had been planning to talk to him for a long time but had been putting it off. Now, as it seemed to her, she could give Lucifer what he had always been waiting for: warm participation care and a piece of real happiness. On the way, she noticed a maid with a tray and asked who the food was being brought to. Having received an answer, she asked if it was intended for Lucifer. The maid confirmed that the food was meant for him. Then Isabella asked for the tray to be given to her. She wanted to take the food herself. The maid hesitated and said that she could not allow the lady to carry food for her, as it seemed to her extremely inappropriate. But Isabella gently insisted. She really wanted to see the boy and personally give him warm food, which was more important than convention. She entered the room where Lucifer was and immediately noticed that he was feeling better. She was reassured by his calm expression. When the boy saw Isabella, he was at first confused, but then he smiled brightly. He was glad that she had come, and it was evident in him. She realized he was hungry and said she had brought food. There was so much warmth in her voice that Lucifer's heart warmed. He asked if she had eaten herself, but she only replied that she would eat later. Right now, all that mattered to her was that he not go hungry. Then the boy suddenly suggested that they try the food they had brought together. Sharing breakfast with her seemed like a good and cozy idea to him. However, the lady gently noted that the cook had tried especially for him, had put his heart into it, and it would be wrong not to appreciate the efforts. Breakfast is the basis of health, after all. The boy asked seriously whether he would become as tall and strong as his father if he ate everything to the end, even if he did not like everything. He had such warm feelings for Ivan that even Isabella had no idea how much the boy loved him and wanted to be like him. The lady replied encouragingly that if he ate well and took care of himself, he would grow up as strong as the Duke. Suddenly the boy announced that he had a gift for the lady, a car which he had carefully kept and prepared for this moment. Isabella remembered hearing a week ago that he was up to something, but she hadn't given it much thought at the time. The boy took a small book from his bosom and admitted that he had been looking for a long time for a clivror in order to give her something special. The lady was sincerely amazed by his actions. She did not expect such attention and care from the child. Embarrassed, she said that there was no point in wasting the gift on her since her main wish had already come true earlier. She added that now he himself must make his wish because it is more important and must come from the heart. Then she asked him what he himself would dream about, and he thought for a long time before he decided to speak his thoughts out loud. Finally, he said that his deepest wish was for the lady to become his real mother. But he immediately added that if she doesn't like him or doesn't want him, he will understand everything and won't be offended. In response, she unexpectedly said that she liked him and added that she would be happy to become his mother. The boy could not believe what he heard. He froze in surprise, but at that very moment his face lit up with a happy smile. He asked again if it was true, and when he heard confirmation he could not hold back his tears. He cried from happiness. He promised that he would be an obedient child, would study well, would not be capricious, and would try to please her in everything. She slowly hugged him, holding him close, and whispered that he didn't have to be perfect to be loved and needed by her side. She confidently repeated that he deserves love simply for the fact that he exists for his heart for who he is, and not for his efforts or successes. She added that he can be real without pretending or trying to fit in, because the main thing is that he is happy, because that is what is important to her. He asked with bated breath if she would really be happy to become his mother, to accept him as part of her life, to give him the care that was lacking. The girl nodded with a gentle smile and admitted that this would make her happy because he had already become a part of her heart, and she saw her future in this. At this time, the Duke retired to his study, sitting in the semi-darkness, and thought about the strange situation with Rayanel Cecia, which did not give him peace. He recalled how he insisted on talking to Julia, asking who this man was, and why he had not shown up since he had promised and seemed important to her. Julia replied that Rayanel had promised to return after receiving consent, but perhaps his family was opposed to the union, which was why everything was being delayed. However, the Duke considered this a fiction and did not believe that any family would be so against marriage with a girl from the Adelhart family, even for reasons of pride. He believed that the man probably already knew about Julia's pregnancy, and he couldn't help but understand how serious it was no matter how much he pretended. But Julia begged her brother not to speak ill of the one she loved, because he was dear to her, and he could not be judged merely by rumors or absence. She also explained that he knew and therefore hurried home for approval, because if a daughter was born, they would name her Lucy, and if a son Lucifer. These names seemed beautiful and meaningful to them, and more importantly, it was he who proposed them, putting into them all his hope and faith in a common future. She asked her brother to look after the baby because the saint was late and her beloved had not yet arrived. She was afraid to leave the child unprotected even for a moment. Her brother could not understand why she continued to wait for this man whose actions were filled with so much pain and doubt, as if she believed in the impossible. That man was the prince of the kingdom of Sessia, the one who had bad rumors about him. They said he was impudent, rude, and violated all the rules of court etiquette. The Duke ordered his servant to find out everything about Raynal's disappearance. He was alarmed by the sudden silence around such an important figure. He also wanted to know what exchanges had taken place between Count Vanine and the Sessia family. This could explain a lot about the recent changes in the area. The servant promised that in addition to the investigation, he would prepare a letter to Count Vanine. It would contain an official request on behalf of the Duke. Exactly 7 years had passed since their last meeting. 7 long years filled with anticipation, anxiety, and memories, as if time itself had stopped. He removed the veil from Julia's portrait. The woman's gaze, frozen on the canvas, seemed to come to life, and looked at him with the same reproach and tenderness. He recently met a woman with pain in her eyes. Like Julia, she hid her past, unwilling to share either her fears or the truth. Every time she hid something important from him, he felt as if his soul was splitting and cracks were spreading inside him. It was just a small grievance, but he couldn't understand why he was so worried about her, as if her pain was his own. Ballet, a woman who could smile even in despair. He looked at her and could not understand where she got so much light, strength, and patience. Isabella's thoughts remained a mystery to him. He could not understand what she was hiding, and why her gaze was full of anxiety that she did not express. When he entered, the boy was not there yet. He stopped at the entrance, holding his breath as if something important had once happened in this place. He didn't even understand what exactly caught his attention, but he still decided to stop and look to the side as if something was beckoning him there to that point. He walked up to a large portrait covered in cloth and carefully removed the old faded tablecloth that hid the image from view. And when the fabric fell, a portrait of a dazzlingly beautiful girl with blonde hair appeared before him, as if she had just emerged from a dream. He couldn't take his eyes off her. This girl seemed like an angel to him, and he kept trying to understand who she could be and why he hadn't seen her before. At this time, Isabella announced that she would soon find Lucifer, and there was a firm confidence in her voice, as if she knew where to look. She called his name again, but despite her efforts, she could not find him in the huge halls and corridors of the castle. Isabella assumed that he might be hiding somewhere in the library, since it was one of his favorite places to play. And Lucifer, pleased and mischievous, was only glad that her search was unsuccessful and considered this his small victory. But suddenly, Isabella noticed that something was sticking out from behind the table, a piece of a shirt or a corner of clothing giving away its location. She pretended not to see anything and continued to ask out loud where he could have gone, pretending to be puzzled. She began looking for him in other corners of the room, opening cabinets and looking behind curtains so as not to spoil the surprise. She carefully walked around all possible hiding places, and only when everything had been looked at did she head towards that very table. She leaned over and looked behind the table, and sure enough she found Lucifer hiding there and couldn't help but smile. Isabella said that she had managed to find him again, and he hung his head and was a little upset because he had hoped that this time he would remain unnoticed. He began to think again about where he could hide now so that Isabella would not be able to find him so quickly. He realized that he needed to come up with some new and unusual place to hide and seek so that it would be interesting for him too. He thought about where he could hide, but he couldn't think of anything suitable yet. Everything seemed too obvious. He then headed towards his father's office, deciding that this was a place he had not yet explored and that it might be the perfect hiding place. Arriving there, he decided to rest a little and suddenly noticed something strange in the corner covered with a bright red blanket. His curiosity got the better of him, and he moved closer to take a closer look at what was underneath the fabric. Carefully, he pulled the ribbon to remove the cover and see what exactly was hidden behind that bright, provocative color. Later during lunch, Isabella suggested to Lucifer that after eating, they take a short walk in the garden to get some fresh air. But he said that today he had a special desire to go to another place because he wanted something new. Isabella, as the mistress of the house and his wife, believed that ancient treasures could be hidden in this place and was intrigued. The guy said that everything is not like that at all. He has a special room where a portrait hangs and it depicts a real angel which he treasures very much. The lady asked again what exactly he was talking about, and he confirmed that he was talking about the portrait in the room which he would like to show in person. He added that he wanted them to look at it together because it was important and especially touching for him. The boy led her through the corridors and they found themselves in a room where the very same portrait of the heavenly being hung. The lady turned her head in surprise and he carefully removed the cover from the painting as if revealing something secret. She was stunned because what she saw shocked her so much. She did not expect to see such a thing at all. The portrait was of Julia Adelhart, and she recognized her immediately, leaving no doubt in her guess. Isabella realized that they needed to leave this place immediately before Ivan learned of their presence here. So she quickly told Lucifer that the angel was indeed beautiful, but now they had to leave urgently. He suddenly asked if his real mother was as beautiful as the woman in the portrait. The lady thought that perhaps he had begun to yearn for his real mother and was trying to find her features in this image. She said that he probably missed her, but the boy said that it was not quite as she thought. Suddenly, Ivan entered the room and his voice was stern. He wanted to know what they were doing here. Lucifer was scared when he saw his father at the door. He didn't expect him to appear right now. The father angrily asked who dared to enter this room, which was supposed to be closed. Lucifer admitted that it was he who opened the room, and the Duke flushed with anger, not hiding his irritation. The boy tried to defend the lady, saying that it was he who asked Isabella to come here, and there was nothing to blame her for. The Duke sternly told them never to come here again and demanded that they remember it well. Lucifer was very upset and did not understand why his father reacted so violently. It seemed too much. Isabella said that the boy understood, and that evening she was already thinking about what story to tell him before going to bed. He was sure that his father was quite angry, and now he was worried that he would do something reckless in his anger because there had been similar outbursts before. She was really worried about Ivan's reaction. She felt guilty. She felt uneasy that he was so worried about everything that had happened. Isabella smiled faintly, assuring him that Ivan was not angry at all, but the young man immediately noticed that her voice was tense and unusually stern. The lady looked down, wondering if she had really sounded too harsh, but she decided that her husband's anger was entirely justified in the current situation. It seemed that all the Duke's anger was directed not at others, but only at himself. This torment had not given him peace since the disappearance of Julia. He reproached himself for not protecting Julia, and Isabella believed that it was precisely because of Lucifer that Ivan was now even more worried, unable to find a place for himself. She tried to calm him down, saying that her father was simply tired. The Duke had been working a lot in recent days, hardly resting or communicating with his loved ones. The boy, being a child, asked again with naive curiosity, and she, smiling, nodded, answering him affirmatively, trying to keep warm. Then she sat down next to him and said that she would like to tell him a story about a handsome knight whom she had known in her childhood and whom she had always admired. The boy recalled with surprise that she had once said that her father could defeat even a terrible dragon, and that seemed amazing to him. Isabella laughed and confirmed, of course her father was very strong, and she added that the young gentleman probably dreamed of becoming just as brave. The boy beamed and enthusiastically agreed. He liked to imagine himself as a mighty hero, saving others and performing feats. The lady asked if he himself would be ready to go and fight the dragon one day, if he became as mature and brave as his father was now. She noted that dragons are very dangerous, scary, and insidious, and not everyone dares to go against them, especially when there is so much at stake. But he confidently said that if he became a great knight, he would certainly protect Isabella no matter how scary it was or how many enemies there were. He was determined. and promised that he would always stand by her side, fight for her if any threat or trouble arose. The lady was a little confused by this statement. She did not expect to hear something like this from a child, and even asked again if she had understood him correctly. The boy assured her that he was going to eat well, grow up as strong as his father, and would definitely become her protector when he grew up. He added that he would not allow anyone to harm her, he would be there and protect her from everything in the world. No one would dare touch her. Even if the worst happens and the dragon grabs Isabella, he will still find a way to defeat the monster and snatch her from the clutches of danger. But suddenly, he noticed that her eyes were filled with tears. This confused him. He did not want to upset the lady, but on the contrary, he wanted to encourage her. The child asked fearfully why Isabella was crying, thinking that perhaps he had said something wrong or done something that had hurt her. He began to worry, thinking that perhaps he had offended her somehow, because he could not understand what exactly had made her so sad at that moment. But the lady quietly explained that it was not about him at all. Her tears were caused by happiness. She was deeply touched by his words and sincerity. He promised to grow up quickly and become as strong as you, so that in the future he could protect the lady and be her support in any situation. She thanked him deeply and was slightly embarrassed by such sincerity and determination. The next day, the father did not appear for the early meal as usual, and this immediately caused concern. He assumed that his father was probably angry with him for something, although he didn't know the exact reason. However, Isabella assured that there was no need to worry, because her father had simply disappeared and was not angry with anyone. She tried to explain that he was not intentionally avoiding Lucifer and did not want to create conflicts between them. It's a pity that the original story about Ivan wasn't told in enough detail. I would have liked to know more about him. The original novel Aria of Light begins with Lucifer already becoming a duke and taking over power. By that time, Ivan unfortunately had already died and little information remains about him. From what little is known in the novel, it is clear that Ivan was a strict and harsh father towards Lucifer. I wish Isabella knew more about him, but she was the unwanted person in this story. She does not understand why Ivan so diligently avoided Lucifer and did not want to communicate with him. However, now she cannot allow this to continue and intends to intervene for the good of the child. For the sake of Lucifer's happiness and future, she is ready to do whatever it takes to improve the relationship. In the evening, she approached the Duke's office and knocked quietly, finally deciding to have a heart-to-heart talk. He assumed that something important had happened since she had decided to come to him so late in the evening. Isabella said she wanted to discuss what happened yesterday and clear things up between them. The Duke replied that he did not want to return to this conversation and would prefer to leave everything as it was. She noticed that Lucifer was taking this situation very hard, and it showed in his behavior. When they signed the contract, she asked him to pay more attention to his son because it was much more important than everything else. The gentleman said that the situation was completely different and therefore could not be compared with others. This was not just an opinion, but a firm position from which he did not retreat. At first she claimed that it was something else, but soon changed her mind, noticing that the changes in him were reflected on his face, changing his expression. She saw how he suddenly, as if by accident but almost holding back tears, showed a rare weakness and vulnerability in his gaze. No one could understand why Ivan was so scared and worried, because his fear seemed inexplicable and incomprehensible to those around him. Most likely he was tormented by the fear that the truth about Lucifer's origin would be revealed, and this would be a terrible blow for everyone. But it was impossible to hide and run from the truth forever. She said that Lucifer would sooner or later learn about his real mother and would seek answers. However, the Duke considered this a weak argument and pointed out that she herself understood the whole situation perfectly well, but he saw no point in revealing everything. He couldn't understand why he would tell Lucifer such a secret, since it could destroy everything that had been built around them. He believed that his son should never know his true roots in order to maintain peace and tranquility in the family. But the lady objected, saying that in life there are no secrets that would remain hidden forever, and sooner or later everything comes out into the open. On the one hand, it would have been better if Lucifer had lived his whole life in ignorance, unaware of the hard truth and remaining at peace. But unfortunately, Lucifer found out about everything after Ivan's death, and this fact changed a lot in his perception and fate. The man whom Lucifer had taken for his father all his life was not really his father, and this truth was hidden from him for a long time, destroying his entire previous picture of the world. She became interested in understanding what Lucifer felt at that moment when he discovered that his ideas about his father were a lie and a deception that deeply wounded his soul. Unfortunately, upon learning that Ivan had been hiding the truth from him, Lucifer felt betrayed and began to doubt Ivan's sincerity and affection for him, which had a heavy impact on him. When Ivan passes away, Lucifer will inevitably learn the whole truth that they tried to hide for a long time, and this will be a painful blow for him that cannot be avoided. That is why she advised the Duke to tell Lucifer the truth in advance, so that he would not find out about it under more unpleasant and painful circumstances that could cause harm. But the gentleman stood up abruptly, grabbing the lady tightly, showing that the question was important and required an immediate solution, without unnecessary delays and doubts. He stated that it was important to him who would be the first to tell Lucifer the truth, because it could influence how his son would perceive what he heard. After all, he is Lucifer's father, and he is responsible for the fate and feelings of his son, making sure that the truth is presented correctly. He distinguished the request for divine service from the promise made to his son, emphasizing that the duty to him required more than just formal words. He also revealed that Lady Adelhart is Lucifer's aunt, which adds new layers to the understanding of family ties and explains some of the hidden secrets. He was asked questions many times, and he began to wonder whether it was worth keeping information about his aunt a secret at all, given the possible consequences. In order not to arouse unnecessary suspicions and not to aggravate the situation, it was decided to at least admit that Lucifer has an aunt without going into details. The Duke could not understand why she cared at all, and why she was so persistent in delving into these matters which seemed alien and unimportant to him. The lady explained that she herself was also an illegitimate child like Lucifer, and she was familiar with the pain that comes with growing up without a mother nearby. She understood the Duke's feelings well, and therefore decided to support him a little to help him cope with his inner experiences. Everything she does is aimed at Lucifer's happiness for his sake. She is ready to go to great lengths and try to fix the situation. After some time, the Duke made up his mind and came to Lucifer, who had been asleep for a long time, not expecting anyone in his room. The boy lay quietly, and the Duke quietly stroked his head, trying to convey at least a little care and affection in this gesture. This child always craved attention and affection from the Duke, but rarely received it, which left him lonely and withdrawn. The Duke could not even understand whether he had lived up to any of Lucifer's expectations, since he had never asked or found out. Although he had never been so obvious about it, he now wondered if he could even call himself a father when so many questions remained unanswered. It was especially hard to realize that he didn't even know about his real mother, the one who once really cared for him. Then Isabella's words came to mind, saying that Lucifer must one day learn the whole truth about himself and his roots. She was sure that this moment would come sooner or later, and there was no point in hiding such important information from her son. These words were true. The Duke understood this, and he felt that one day he would have to reveal the truth to Lucifer. He understood that after what happened, many things would change and their relationship would no longer be the same, but there was no other way out. Otherwise, the situation could not be resolved, although it was hard to accept. Still, there remained an important question. Would Lucifer be able to continue to smile at his father, knowing the truth and feeling the pain that was hidden in the past? And to what extent would he be able to do so? Having thought it all over, the Duke left the room feeling the weight of fatigue. He went to bed hoping to collect his thoughts, regain his strength, and find the answers that were so necessary for making decisions. In his dream, the image of his father appeared to him as if inviting him to a conversation. Lucifer seemed to be asking himself questions. Why did his father do exactly that, trying to understand the reasons and find at least some justification? The father, however, did not realize how his behavior seemed rude. He complained that he did not receive even a simple greeting from his son, and this seemed strange and offensive to him, as if their connection had been broken. The Duke still held Julia's gaze, looking at his son. He tried to understand why his father was behaving this way, why there was a distance between them, and how to bridge this gap that had appeared between them. He asked himself questions about the reasons for his father's behavior, about his coldness and lack of warmth which Lucifer so needed. Father said that sometimes both Julia and he looked pathetic, like weak-willed and weak people who could be easily broken. These words sounded cold and stern, like a sentence. He punished Julia for her immoral and stupid actions, believing that she had crossed the line, and such mistakes were unacceptable in their family where everyone must control themselves. In his opinion, there had to be strict discipline and order in the family, so that no one could weaken authority and respect, otherwise everything would fall apart and go awry. Ivan felt a fire of anger flare up in his chest from his father's words. His irritation was so strong that he could not restrain himself and wanted to say something immediately. He took a step forward, approaching his father with such confidence as if he was challenging him. His gaze became hard and intense, as if he wanted to show that he could not be ignored so easily and that this would have to be taken into account. The father seemed not to understand the seriousness of his son's gaze. He looked at Ivan with slight bewilderment and even a hint of contempt, clearly not expecting him to dare to speak to him so directly and without respect. Ivan made it clear without ambiguity, if his father dared to touch Julia even once more in word or deed, he would not stand aside. He was ready to protect his sister at any cost, no matter what. He made it clear that no violence or humiliation towards Julia would go unanswered. There was a firmness and inflexibility in his voice and demeanor that left no room for doubt. Ivan's determination was so strong that it seemed he was ready to stand up for his sister and fight anyone who dared to encroach on her without thinking about the consequences or fear. A memory came to mind of someone trying to calm Lucifer down, who was in complete confusion and couldn't find a place for himself. It seemed like the whole situation was weighing on him with such force that he couldn't cope with the anxiety. He turned to his nanny in an attempt to understand what exactly was happening around him, why everything around him seemed so strange and disturbing at this very moment when everything was unclear and tense. The nanny explained that the young gentleman could not stop crying, as if some deep pain and grief was accumulating inside him that he simply could not cope with alone. Ivan came closer to the nanny and asked her to give Lucifer something that could at least help the boy a little, trying to ease his condition and give support in this difficult moment. The nanny asked if Ivan was sure that he could cope with such a difficult emotional state and that he would be there to support the boy and not leave him alone. Ivan firmly replied that he could handle it without a doubt and asked the nanny to help him hold Lucifer's head so that the boy would not feel abandoned and alone in this state. In his arms, Lucifer smiled, and in that smile one could read gratitude as if for the first time in a long time he felt real care and support that warmed him. Then the boy began to laugh. It was a clear sign of relief and joy, and after that he stopped crying, finally finding peace and confidence next to Ivan. He named him Lucifer, giving the child a name with a special meaning that immediately attracted the attention of everyone present, despite its unusual sound. The maid did not immediately understand what was hidden behind this name, but he calmly explained that the boy's name was Lucifer Adelhart, revealing the importance and destiny of the child. Zhenya noted that it was a very beautiful name, emphasizing its sound and uniqueness, which caused her sincere admiration and respect for the chosen name. The gentleman explained that Julia had sacrificed a lot for the life of this child, and therefore the name had a special meaning that reflected her sacrifice and hopes for the future. In the Adelhart family, he deserves to receive the sizot he has yet to achieve, as it is an important part of his future and status within the family. The nanny confidently noted that the lady would also like the child to receive the best possible things and for fate to be kind to him. Meanwhile, the baby had already fallen asleep peacefully in his arms, showing trust and peace that were rare in this difficult world around them. However, Lucifer cannot appear in public as Julia's son because his origin must remain a secret to everyone, which creates an atmosphere of secrecy around him. He has a different path. He will be presented as the son of the master, and only in this way will he be accepted in this society where family ties are of great importance. He decided to claim the child as his son in order to protect him and give him the opportunity to take a worthy place in the family and society. The father was very angry and did not understand how Ivan could do this, considering it an inappropriate and provocative act that threatened to destroy the family foundations. Ivan grabbed his father's hand sharply as he tried to strike. His eyes were burning with determination. He was ready to stand his ground and defend his decisions no matter what. He firmly stated that the father must learn one thing: Lucifer is his son, and that is how it will be regardless of any other people's opinions or attempts to interfere with this. The child would grow up and become his successor. This was precisely why Ivan began a struggle that was not easy to ensure his son a worthy future and his place next to him. He carefully thought out the path that Lucifer would have to take, planning every step and strategy so that his son could become a worthy heir and achieve success. However, Ivan could not understand why she constantly said that his choice was wrong and why her doubts made him hesitate, leaving unresolved questions deep in his soul. I always forgot that she says this with a smile that you want to protect, understanding that behind her words, there is care and hidden support despite the differences. The Duke came to Isabella unexpectedly, and she noticed his presence with slight surprise, not expecting such a visit at that moment. His gaze was tense. He expressed a desire for Isabella to give him a little time, even just a minute, explaining that there was an important matter that he wanted to discuss with her in person and without unnecessary witnesses. Isabella noticed that the Duke's eyes were red and thought that he probably hadn't slept well or that something had been bothering him a lot lately, making him look tired and tense. She assured him that she could give him the time he needed to listen and discuss what was bothering him, showing a willingness to help and understand the situation. After this, she suggested that they step aside a little to talk more privately without prying ears, since the topic was probably delicate and required privacy. The Duke led her into a room or chamber that contained a special part of the interior, perhaps a hall or study where important things were kept, and where Isabella had already found herself despite the unfamiliarity of the surroundings. He removed the cover from one of the objects and again showed the portrait of Julia, which had been hidden, as if this image was especially important to him and contained many feelings and memories. The Duke admitted that he had not yet made a final decision on whether to tell Lucifer the truth about his mother, as it was a very difficult and painful issue for him. He noted that if he could, he would have kept this secret to himself all his life in order to protect his son from unnecessary worries and maintain peace, but he understood that sooner or later the truth would come out. However, he thought it would be a good idea to tell Lucifer about his aunt someday, as it was a part of his life and family that couldn't be completely hidden or forgotten. Isabella asked the Duke to allow Lucifer to come here to admire the portrait so that he could at least slightly touch the memory of his mother and feel a connection with her. The Duke said he allowed it and that Lucifer could come here at any time without restrictions to look at the portrait and think about his family. Isabella wondered why the Duke himself did not tell Lucifer the whole truth and was waiting for the moment for a frank conversation because he was clearly very worried and determined to take this step. The Duke replied that he had already thought about this conversation and was going to carry it out himself, taking responsibility for telling his son everything that needed to be said. After that, the boy invited Mrs. Isabella to come with him, helping her with the wheelbarrow so that carrying the things would be easier and more convenient. He carefully supported her so that she would not get tired and everything would be in order during the move. Isabella asked the boy to behave calmly and not to rush so as not to create fuss and not to cause unnecessary worries. It was important to her that everything happened calmly with respect for those around and without unnecessary disorder. The boy said that it was worth looking where his aunt was, a person he talked about a lot and was sincerely proud of. He showed special affection for her, wanting Isabella to see her too. The boy spoke enthusiastically about his aunt as if she was a very important and close person to him. There was joy and pride in his voice. He did not hide his feelings, sharing memories and impressions. He explained that his aunt was his paternal grandfather's older sister, and the nanny told him a lot about her, noting that this woman was like an angel because of her kindness and beauty, which left a strong impression. Isabella thought to herself that this woman really did look like a bright and kind person, creating an atmosphere of comfort and warmth around her. Her presence filled the room with a special feeling of calm and care. At this time, a maid came in and announced that an unexpected guest had come to the mistress about whom nothing had been known, before causing slight surprise. Isabella asked in surprise who exactly this guest was, and why she knew nothing about his visit, showing caution and interest in what was happening. The maid replied that Countess Vanine had come with her and was expecting to meet her mistress, although such a visit seemed unexpected and a little alarming. However, Isabella immediately said that there would be no meeting and suggested sending the Countess back, adding that if she appeared again, she should not even be listened to or let in. The maid noticed that the Countess had warned that if Isabella did not come out to her, she would not send her personal maid, thereby trying to achieve a meeting by any means necessary. Then Isabella told the younger Duke that she would go away for a minute as she had to receive guests, but she promised to return quickly and asked him to wait for her without worrying. Lucifer became upset and asked if it was really that important and necessary, expressing regret at the temporary separation and change of plans. The lady assured him that she would return soon, and that everything would be fine in order to dispel his worries and maintain peace in their relationship. She took the boy by the hand and promised that after the meeting they would definitely take a walk in the garden together to spend time together and enjoy the peace. She also explained that they plan to make bracelets from these materials, which will have a special symbolic meaning and serve as a reminder of an important event that unites all those present into one community. The Countess loudly declared that she was Isabella's mother and wondered why she was being forbidden to meet her daughter right now, despite her persistent demands and emotional appeals. The man tried to calm her down, explaining that now was the time for change, and soon everyone would find the solution that they all had to come to for the common good. At that very moment, Isabella appeared and asked who exactly was with her mother, trying to understand what was happening and why the atmosphere around had become so tense and anxious. She stepped into the room and greeted the Countess politely, displaying a calm and composed manner that contrasted sharply with the general tension and excitement in the room. The Countess looked very angry and disheveled, as if she was internally struggling with herself, not knowing what was the best thing to do and what choice to make in the current situation. Isabella noted that in such an environment there was no point in serving tea, so the servants could stay away so as not to create unnecessary fuss and not distract from the main thing. The Countess did not immediately understand what the cold and, from her point of view, disrespectful reception that she had just received meant, and this made her displeased. Isabella stated that she should not show respect to uninvited guests, emphasizing that this was not an ordinary meeting. The Countess was very angry and could not believe that Isabella had allowed herself to say such words without realizing the full seriousness of the moment. Isabella asked how she could do that to her before recalling the relationship they had before. She said that the Countess had not invited them to the wedding, and that was why the Duke had declared that she would not get a man devoted to her. The Countess was convinced that Isabella simply wanted to sever all ties with her family and break off the relationship that had bound them together for a long time. Isabella confirmed what was said, which enraged the Countess even more, causing a storm of irritation and anger in her, which was noticeable in her every movement. The Countess began to shout, accusing Isabella of forgetting who exactly had brought about this marriage, and reminding her of all the efforts that had been made to get her to agree to marry him. Isabella calmly noted that she herself would ultimately be the Hartsook's bride, and if she married him she would become part of the Adelhart family, which gave her status greater importance. Therefore, Isabella decided that further communication with the Vanine family was pointless, and that it was useless to continue this connection since their interests had diverged too much. The Countess became even more angry when Isabella added that she was not pleased even to bear their family name, which was a serious insult to the Countess. Realizing that the argument was pointless and that nothing more could be said, Isabella decided to leave, not wanting to waste any more time on empty quarrels. The Countess was overcome with rage and could no longer contain her emotions, which manifested itself in her screams and threatening words towards Isabella. She began to loudly declare so that Isabella would not forget that it was they who saved her mother's life, reminding her of her power and the strength she possessed. Isabella asked if this was a threat, and if the Countess wanted to harm her mother, showing that she was not afraid and was ready to resist even such hints. The Countess replied that this was merely a reason to think, and a reminder that the debt must be repaid, subtly threatening and pressing on the conscience. Isabella could not understand how her only true family could be affected and firmly demanded that the Countess leave immediately, not wanting to tolerate such behavior any longer. The Countess continued to shout loudly at Isabella, expressing her displeasure and her determination not to let the situation go unnoticed. She made it clear that she would intervene if anyone interfered with her plans. She stressed that if the mother takes any action, it will not remain so simple, and she will not allow it to pass without a trace, declaring her determination to intervene and protect interests. The Countess said that Isabella had really changed, that now her behavior and views had become completely different, and this caused her strong emotions and experiences. After this, she also noted that she wanted to add something to what had been said so that the situation would become clearer, and so that important details that could influence further developments would be taken into account. She suggested that it would be wise if Annie the maid were sent here to help with matters and support them in the current circumstances. The Countess insisted that she could not leave everything as it was, and that it was necessary to take measures to change the course of events and bring the situation back under her control. It was time for her to visit her Siyumbal to discuss what was happening and get the necessary information that would help her better understand the situation and make the right decisions. Sumbil was asked how he knew about Talon, which aroused interest and caution, since this information was quite delicate and not for everyone. He explained that Arya's cough had noticeably decreased, and this was due to the fact that the ripening of the talent flowers was working effectively, which could be considered a positive sign. However, it remained unclear how exactly the lady learned about these events, but the gentleman believed that he did not need to know all the details, and this remained a secret for him. She stressed that the details were not so important now because the main thing was that her younger sister had finally started to feel better, and for everyone present, this was the highest priority, more important than any other issues. He smiled slightly, confirming that he did agree with this approach, after which she calmly asked if there was anything else he would like to talk about, continuing to keep the conversation on a business-like note. He said that the doctor she had already spoken to lived in the northern part of the capital, where the main medical institutions and advanced scientific centers were concentrated, which made the meeting especially significant. The lady expressed a strong desire to meet this doctor in person and asked if it was possible to organize such a meeting in the near future to discuss all the issues important to them. He assured her that he would take her to the right person and reminded her that last time he had cashed in the jewelry that the lady had entrusted to him to carry out certain tasks. In front of her was a certificate issued from a bank case and containing official confirmation of ownership or rights to valuable assets. However, the lady was completely unaware of the reasons why he was giving her this particular certificate and felt some bewilderment. He explained that this certificate contains important information for her that can help in solving current problems and issues. If this is indeed the case, he believes it is related to the talent flowers, a symbol of life and the memory of his younger sister to whom he feels a deep affection. In this case, the sister's name must be engraved on the certificate, and if the lady does not object, he would like to know her name for the correct execution of the documents. The lady replied that her name was Isabella, and she considered this name important and significant for herself and her family. He noted that she really has a very beautiful and rare name, which perhaps carries special meaning and power. He also mentioned that he had cast a special spell on the certificate so that she would not have to worry about losing it or using it incorrectly. The lady expressed her gratitude, apologized for the disturbance, and added that she had one more request. She wanted to find a certain person who was important to her. He said it was no problem and asked who exactly needed to be found. The lady replied that she needed to find her mother in order to reconnect and understand many things. She barely remembered anything from her past, except that she had pink hair and no other information remained in her memory. This seemed strange and disturbing to her. The gentleman understood that collecting so much information would take a lot of time, but he realized that he needed to find it as soon as possible. It was important to get ahead of the girl's father and get key information to avoid delays in the case. Symbio hoped to gather as much information as possible before her father began his own search. This would help them prepare for any unexpected turns and not miss any important details in their investigation. The lady reported that Count Vanine knew this girl, which could be an important clue in their case. This acquaintance could open up new directions for the search and help to understand her motives and connections. 20 years ago, the girl worked for the Count, and this fact became the starting point for studying her past. Studying those times allowed us to understand her environment and connections that could be useful in the investigation. Although it was possible to simply pay for the information, the lady decided to offer much more if necessary in order to obtain the necessary information and not miss the opportunity to get help in the case. Today she asked what else the lady knew about this matter. She replied that she knew a person who could cure the gentleman's sister, which was extremely important for their future plans. The gentleman showed keen interest and asked who exactly could help with the treatment, hoping that this would speed up the process and lead to a positive result in the near future. Isabella explained that she was just about to meet with this doctor today and could quickly arrange a meeting so as not to waste time and resolve the issue as quickly as possible. When Isabella knocked, the door was opened by a red-haired girl who looked at her carefully, expressing slight bewilderment and interest. The girl asked who the lady was and then apologized for frightening Isabella with her sudden appearance and strange behavior. She asked if Isabella was Lady Erin Rauner, which made the girl freak out and ask how she knew about it. Isabella said she came here because she heard that there was a talented doctor living in this place, and she had a request she wanted to discuss. The girl was clearly surprised and at the same time a little scared by the situation she found herself in. Her eyes expressed doubt and indecision, but she tried to remain calm. She said she was willing to let them out, but wanted to clarify what exactly she meant by her request and what was actually required of them. Isabella answered directly that she intended to refuse her support, not hiding her intentions, and explaining the reasons for her decision without unnecessary words. The girl explained that in order to sell her medicines on the market, she was looking for sponsors and heard that there were interested parties willing to help. Erin confirmed that this was true, but noted that all potential sponsors had their own conditions and plans that did not coincide with her interests. They tried to take most of the profits, which caused her frustration and discontent as it infringed on her rights and opportunities. Erin grew tired of such proposals and declared that she no longer wished to deal with the nobles, considering them too selfish and dishonest. In her opinion, these nobles are no different from others, and she herself does not want to become part of their games and support them out of selfish motives. The lady gracefully noted that she understood her position and would not claim that they were different from others, but she respected Erin's opinion and her choice. She stressed that the doctor herself would determine the price of her drugs and agreed to receive 10% of the profits as a fair share. She had no intention of interfering with how the girl managed her donations, trusting her completely in this matter without demanding reports or explanations. The girl doctor could not understand why the lady showed such deep trust in her and completely believed in her abilities, although she had not yet had time to particularly show herself in action and prove her professionalism. The lady explained that in return they were counting on the young woman's help, counting on her medical knowledge and attentive, caring attitude towards people, which was very important for the upcoming work. The girl was surprised, not immediately realizing what was being discussed, until the man next to Isabella explained that help was needed for his younger sister who needed special care and attention. The younger sister was weak from birth. She had serious problems with her respiratory system, and even with minor physical exertion or excitement, she began to experience an acute shortness of breath. All the medications that she had been given before did not bring the necessary relief and noticeable improvement, so the girl wanted to see the girl in person to better understand her condition and help her more effectively. The man said that the meeting could take place at the Adelhart estate, and the lady should take with her everything necessary to provide qualified assistance and examination on site. This will be a kind of confirmation of serious intentions on their part, to show that they are ready to cooperate and provide all the conditions for comfortable and successful treatment. In addition, the guy promised to introduce the girl to his younger sister so that she could personally assess her condition, understand the causes of the disease, and choose the most appropriate course of therapy. Isabella became interested in finding out who this girl named Aria was because this name sounded mysterious and unusual to her, making her want to know more about the character and fate of the child. She assumed that Aria was most likely as sweet and charming as Lucifer, which awakened in her a keen interest and desire to help this particular girl. After that, they set off, and Sybil actually took the car to ensure the most comfortable and fast travel on the road to the estate, where Aria was waiting. After all, the Sierra Guild was originally created precisely for the purpose of finding a cure for Aria's disease, and now the time has come to turn their long-standing plans and hopes into reality. He said that Aria would be very happy to see the lady, and that it was a big event for her because she was rarely in a circle of new people. This caused her slight surprise and interest. He also noted that Aria is his sister, and for this reason he monitors her condition and mood very closely, since it is difficult for her to maintain frequent contact with others due to her weakness. He explained that due to her illness, Aria was unable to meet people often, so every new acquaintance is a special joy for her, which she sincerely enjoys and cherishes. Isabella understood this and took it calmly without showing strong emotions, simply accepting the information as a given without going into details. He added that, moreover, he believes that Aria likes children, and it is in this that she finds special comfort and warmth which helps her cope with the disease. Isabella immediately said that this was not entirely true and that Aria was not particularly keen on children, but she expressed this opinion quietly without much argument. She realized the need to be kind and considerate to Aria, despite her doubts and inner worries. She understood that this connection was of great importance to the family, and her attitude towards Aria was part of an important responsibility. Aria was destined to become Lucifer's beloved, and caring for her was not just a duty, but an expression of respect for her loved ones and the fate of the family, which required careful treatment and support from her. When they returned, they encountered the butler, whose gloomy appearance clearly betrayed the absence of a joyful mood, which created an atmosphere of tension and some expectation of something incomprehensible in the room. He mentioned that there was a lady with him, causing surprise and questions among those present because no one understood who exactly this woman was and why she appeared in the house at that particular moment. The butler was surprised that no one knew this woman, but Sumbiel explained that she was his special client, who would often appear in the house, which immediately made her an important figure in their lives. It became clear that she would be visiting Aria regularly, so it was necessary to take care of her as a guest and provide her with comfort, attention, and respect in order to maintain an atmosphere of trust and calm. The butler added that the woman's name was Rose, a beautiful name that he thought suited her perfectly and had a special symbolic meaning, giving her appearance additional significance. He promised to bring a bouquet of roses for the lady next time to express his respect and attention, thereby emphasizing the importance and respect for her person. The lady expressed her gratitude for the care and, accompanied, went to Aria's room, preparing for the upcoming important meeting on which much depended. Maria was surprised when she learned that her new doctor would not be the scary grandfather, but someone else who could inspire more confidence and bring the peace of mind necessary for her condition. Isabella assured that her sister must understand that everything will work out, and in the end it will really be good, despite the difficulties and experiences that now seem important. Aria said that she would change now and would be back soon, asking to wait a little to get ready and not interfere with the important things happening around. As expected, the lady showed genuine kindness to the children, showing care and attention that felt genuine and sought only the good of the little ones. The lady noted that her actions were dictated not only by kindness, but also by the fulfillment of adult duties, which she perceives as part of her responsibility. Then Sumbiel noted that if all people mentally treated their duties in the same way, the world would be much more beautiful and kinder, filled with mutual understanding. He emphasized that among the doctors, there were sometimes those who tried to use Aria in their experiments, not caring about her well-being, but for their own purposes. But despite such attempts, all dangerous situations were quickly prevented thanks to vigilance and support, which helped to maintain safety. After this, Arya began to not let doctors near her, wary of new attempts at intervention in order to protect herself from unwanted experiments and risks. The lady explained that the doctor they found was not working out of love for children, but rather for personal gain, which increased the wariness and anxiety surrounding the treatment. She promised to do everything possible to cure Arya despite the difficulties, sparing no effort or time for the sake of the girl's health and her future. Aaron reported that the girl had a weak pulse and wanted to clarify what other doctors had said before trying to understand the course of treatment and the diagnoses that had been made. Mr. Yah said that the doctors' opinions differed, but in general, they agreed that Arya had bronchitis, although with different details in the descriptions and treatment prescriptions. The doctor expressed doubts that the problem was really bronchitis, suggesting that Arya had recently taken some medications that could have affected the condition. He added that the girl had taken a potion of talent flowers, which the doctor said only grows in the kingdom of Cesia, and contains mana, which probably helped her. The boy confirmed that it really did help, and it was the most effective of all that had been tried. Then the doctor explained that the flower was a medicine usually prescribed to young priests. She realized that if her health worsened in the future, she would need to continue giving this decoction to maintain health and prevent exacerbations. After she took a step back, closely monitored the progress of the disease, and promised to write a prescription for the necessary treatment, her attention did not wane because the condition required constant monitoring and care. At that moment, the door opened and Lucifer entered, who asked Mrs. Isabella with interest where she had spent all this time, expressing slight surprise and a desire to understand what was happening. He was very surprised to see a large group of people in the room, which was completely different from his expectations, because he did not expect that so many guests would gather here. Lucifer immediately apologized for his unexpected appearance, openly admitting that he was unaware that Isabella had guests and therefore did not want to disturb anyone. Isabella calmly replied that everything was fine, inviting him in, as if his sudden appearance had not caused her any irritation or inconvenience. She explained that those present were her friend and his younger sister Arya, who were now with her and made up this small group. The boy introduced himself, greeted everyone gathered, and said that he was Lucifer from the Adelhart family, proudly indicating his belonging to a noble family. The girl Arya asked with lively interest how old Lucifer was, showing genuine curiosity about her new acquaintance and wanting to learn more about him. The boy replied with slight pride that he was already 7 years old, confirming his age and demonstrating self-confidence. Arya announced that she was also 7 years old, smiling and showing her friendliness, which immediately created an atmosphere of trust and mutual affection. She added that it was wonderful because they were the same age and that she liked him, so she wanted him to become her special friend and companion. The boy asked shyly if she really wanted to be friends with him, not immediately believing in the sincerity of such an open and friendly offer. He confessed that she would become his first real friend in life, a person with whom he could share his thoughts and feelings without fear or doubt. She replied that it was their shared secret, but she really wanted to whisper something in his ear. Something that would be understood only by the two of them, giving their communication a special mystery and importance that no outsider would be able to understand. Hearing this, he immediately blushed and became embarrassed, not expecting such sincerity and warmth. This moment made their connection much closer, giving a feeling of special closeness which both of them immediately felt. He looked incredibly sweet at that moment, and she responded that he too had become her first true friend. This confession warmed their hearts, filling their communication with light and warmth. After a while, they had a small tea party where they could calmly relax and enjoy the conversation. In a cozy atmosphere, they forgot all their worries and concerns for a while, completely immersing themselves in the moment. Lucifer insisted that Arya taste the treat he had prepared. He explained that she was his most beloved and precious person and therefore deserved only the best he could offer. He even fed her from his hands, which looked very sweet and touching. His caring and gentle movements expressed the attention with which he treated her, showing the full depth of his feelings. She said that everything was delicious, and her smile was shining with genuine joy and gratitude. It made the moment truly warm and memorable for both of them. The younger Duke noticed that he had not seen her so excited for a long time and asked if he could bring her here often now so that they could spend time together. The lady replied that it was possible and he did not have to come himself. He could send the lady alone because she would always be welcome there. Sumbyul was deeply moved by the lady's words, feeling appreciated and understood, which gave him strength and inspiration for further action. Despite expectations, communicating with Sumbyul was surprisingly simple, easy, and natural, as if there had never been any barriers or misunderstandings between them. It became more and more interesting with each passing day because she could boldly be herself, the real Isabella Van Eyne, without hiding behind masks and hypocrisy. At that moment, the Duke approached them and remarked that he had heard of the recent arrival of important guests in the city, which added intrigue to their quiet evening. Sumbyul noted that they had not seen each other for a long time, and at the same time stopped using magic, showing his readiness for open and sincere communication without cover. The Duke had absolutely no idea what was going on in this place and why Sumbyul was there. Everything seemed strange and unexpected to him. He tried to figure out the situation, but he couldn't. Isabella explained that she was the one who invited Sumbyul because he had been a great help to her, and she wanted to thank him personally for his support in this matter. The Duke wondered if something important had happened that had caused the Sumbul to appear here. He began to watch the situation closely, being cautious and wary in his actions, in order to understand the true reasons for the visit. Sumbyul explained that he was actually just helping the lady get some rest on the road. He didn't want to create any unnecessary problems or misunderstandings, but only wanted to make her journey easier and provide support. The gentleman warned everyone not to misinterpret his words. He sincerely wanted to help, and everyone should correctly understand his intentions without doubting his goodwill and honesty. Isabella apologized for inviting Sumbyul without consulting the others, explaining that she had not thought about how it might be perceived by others and what questions such an action might raise. She promised to ask permission from now on, before inviting anyone into the house, to avoid misunderstandings and maintain order in the family, showing respect for traditions and rules. The Duke noted that now that she had become a member of the Adelhart family, Isabella had the right to make decisions on her own and act without constantly looking back at anyone else's opinion. In his opinion, she is now free in her actions and should not be limited by formalities, since this is her family, and from now on, she has the right to independently manage her life and actions. Sumbyul did not want conflicts or quarrels to arise because of his presence. He tried to ease the tension and establish a friendly atmosphere so that everyone could communicate calmly and understand each other. He began the conversation by asking to introduce the Duke to his sister Arya, believing that this acquaintance would be important for everyone in the room and would help to better understand each other's intentions. Sumbyul believed that fate had brought them together for a reason, and that now was the time to mend their relationship in order to establish strong contact and strengthen mutual understanding between the families. He asked Arya to come to him, explaining that she really needed to meet with the Duke and establish a friendly dialogue that could influence further events. Arya, realizing the importance of the moment, approached the Duke and greeted him politely, showing respect and a willingness to engage in constructive communication at this significant time for both parties. She introduced herself as Arya of the Danois family, indicating her noble origins, which emphasized her high status and the importance of her role in this acquaintance and in further interactions. The Duke invited everyone to make themselves comfortable and rest, explaining that he had urgent matters to attend to and asked them to contact him only if necessary, so as not to distract them from important matters. Isabella, noticing the warm communication between Lucifer and Arya, asked the Duke to allow her to visit Lucifer more often in order to maintain good relations and strengthen the bond between them, which seemed important to her. The Duke replied that he agreed if Sumbyul could be trusted, showing caution, but also a willingness to cooperate. He promised to hand over the care of the children to the butler and said that he would soon leave, finishing his business. Despite his words that everything was under control, his face expressed hidden anxiety and inner worry. Outwardly, he looked upset, which was noticed by those around him who sensed that he was not in the best shape. The Duke's servant, noticing his gloomy mood, became interested in what exactly had caused this state. He supposed that the gentleman might have heard of the commotion the Countess had caused, and that it might have upset him or disturbed him greatly. Such noise rarely went unnoticed in the Duke's house. The servant wanted to clarify the situation and convey the news, but the Duke immediately asked if he was really allowed to talk about it, showing that the conversation required caution and precision. The servant said that the Countess had indeed arrived in the morning and had made quite a noise which was so noticeable that it could have upset the master given her status and influence. The Duke asked if everything was okay with Isabella, to which the servant answered in the affirmative, assuring that there were no problems with her and there was no need to worry about her condition. The lady gave strict instructions to ensure that such incidents did not happen again, and then asked what documents exactly the servant was currently holding that required attention. The servant explained that these were the results of research into the connections between the Count's family and the royal dynasty of Cessia, which had been mentioned earlier, but now the information had become more complete. Recently, there has been a noticeable increase in interest and demand for magical items, which has significantly affected the empire's economy and complicated the relationships between different parties and groups. Very close trade relations are maintained between Count Vanaine and the kingdom, which are not only maintained but also actively developed every year, strengthening mutual cooperation. Through this trading partnership, representatives of the Earl's family and the kingdom regularly interact in various areas including economics, politics, and cultural exchanges. Prince Raynel left to study at the academy more than 14 years ago and was absent from his native land for a long time, which raised questions and speculations among many about his fate. 8 years ago, he returned shortly before finishing his studies, but the reason for his year-long absence was a prison sentence, which came as a surprise to everyone. The same records contain information that during this same period, Count Van made an official visit to the kingdom, which also attracted the attention of researchers and historians. The connection between Prince Raynel's imprisonment and Count Van's visit remains unclear, raises many questions, and suggests hidden circumstances that have not yet been revealed. At this time, there is no conclusive evidence to say for sure that Raynel is Lucifer's father, although such rumors and versions continue to circulate. Isabella drew attention to the fact that there is an alternative version of events that differs significantly from the official one, and its details arouse interest and doubt. They say that in the year of the prince's disappearance, his appearance changed dramatically. He became noticeably thinner, although he had previously had a strong build and looked like a completely healthy person. People believe that he was arrested on suspicion of treason, but since he was not executed, this is more of a rumor than a confirmed fact. If this is indeed true, it would explain why he was unable to return to Julia and remained away from her. The servant asked what should be done now to understand the situation and the next steps. The gentleman replied that it was necessary to check whether there was a curse on the royal family, and at the same time no one should be told about the investigation itself. The Countess told her husband that Isabella had become completely different, a very strange and unpredictable woman. She couldn't understand why she was kicked out so easily, and even called it an uninvited costume, which sounded incomprehensible and strange. Moreover, she mentioned her personal maid, who was also fired, which only increased her indignation and bewilderment. Therefore, the Countess asked her husband to intervene and do something about Isabella's behavior, hoping that he would not leave everything unpunished. Things got even stranger with a letter from Duke Adelhart, who clearly dominated the conversation about the child's biological father. At first, he obediently agreed to the engagement, but suddenly his attitude towards the situation changed dramatically and became unpredictable. It is obvious that Isabella is doing something unusual that is causing him to change his behavior and plans. He thought he had raised her to be obedient and submissive like a dog, but it turned out that everything was completely different. In the end, despite her beauty and other qualities, he can't just leave things as they are and is going to act. Rumors surrounded the people that he had been arrested for attempted treason, although there was always another way, and he waved his hand so that the servant would understand without words. He gave the order to bring the woman Isabella's mother to him to resolve the matter personally and without unnecessary witnesses, because her presence was more important than anyone thought. Lucifer met Arya, welcoming her back with a slight smile, as if they hadn't seen each other for a long time, and there was a history between them that only they knew about. Arya revealed that she had come not only for Lucifer, but also to see Isabella, which added mystery to their meeting and made one wonder about her goals. However, she quickly realized that her main target was Lucifer and began to make excuses, trying to hide her true desire to meet Isabella. Sumbul reported that Arya had been asking to go to Dullheart's mansion for a long time, and he was very sorry that she had to wait so long because she was persistent and wary. Despite this, the lady assured that everything was fine, and Lucifer was also waiting for her with impatience, which spoke of the importance of their meeting and trust in each other. The boy asked the girl why she called Mrs. Isabella sister, which seemed strange to him since that was not how people usually spoke. The girl used Isabella's shortened name, which surprised the boy because he was not used to hearing such addresses in their circle. He admitted that he too would like to call Madame Isabella by such a short name, as if in this way he could become closer to her and express respect. The lady was at first surprised by such a desire, because it violated traditions and seemed unusual in their circles, but her reaction changed quickly. Then she smiled and allowed it, saying that of course he could address her that way if it made him feel good, opening up a little personal space. In response, the boy was delighted and even a little embarrassed, not expecting such kindness and warmth in her words, which sincerely touched him. He rapturously said her abbreviated name several times, feeling joy and a little excitement at the fact that he could address her personally in this way. Arya, noticing this, asked him to stop talking like that, as if she didn't want this closeness to become too obvious and break the rules. Sumbul also asked the lady if they could talk in private, hinting at an important conversation that required privacy and attention. The lady suggested going to the garden for a private conversation. He reported that he had found the person she had asked about, which aroused her interest and hope. The woman had previously lived in a village on Lord Owen's lands, which sounded familiar to her, but at the same time didn't give her any exact information. These words meant little to Isabella, but she clearly remembered details that could help her understand the situation. She thought that they had found her instead of the situation, and he confirmed this, adding that her mother was now in another place. Suddenly, vivid images of her mother surfaced in her memory. Her face, her gestures, her voice, everything came to life so vividly, as if it had happened just recently, as if only a moment had passed yesterday. In her thoughts, she called her mother to her, plunging into warm memories of those times when she was still very little, and these moments seemed incredibly close and real. Mom called her by a sweet short name, and there was a feeling of joy in her heart, as if she were again on the beach with friends, enjoying sunny days and carefree times. Isabella must have felt hungry, but inside she felt warm and cozy from the memories, which caused a slight sadness, like a sweet longing for something that can never be returned, although it was just a dream. This sweet sadness seemed to her even deeper than the feelings of the main character of real life, and from within there was a desire to become a completely different person, to wake up and change everything around. The maid noticed the change in her mistress's condition and turned to her with concern, trying to understand what was happening and express her willingness to help and support her in difficult times. She assumed that the lady might have been sleeping poorly or was worried, so she wanted to surround her with attention to lighten her mood and make the day more peaceful. The lady quietly confirmed her worries, and the maid, confident that everything would work out, gently said that today would be a good day and there was no need to worry about trifles. At that moment, a servant entered the room and announced an unexpected guest, which broke the silence and brought a slight excitement into the atmosphere among those present preparing for the meeting. From the very morning, the lady showed a keen interest, asking questions about the stranger who had appeared without warning, which aroused curiosity and questions in her and those around her. The woman with pink hair remained adamant no matter how many times they asked. She did not reveal her plans and intentions, as if she was hiding a personal hidden secret behind her smile. She tried to get inside, but they wouldn't let her in, despite her assurances that she would only stay for a short time, just a minute, and would not disturb anyone with her presence. By persistently calling Isabella's name, the woman seemed to hope that it would become a key open doors for her and allow her to achieve her desired goal, overcoming all obstacles along the way. She then asked to be released, calling Isabella her daughter, which sounded touching and caused mixed feelings in the audience. Coming closer, she began to ask about her affairs, showing concern and interest, as if she had not seen a loved one for a long time. The woman also noted that Isabella had not changed a bit, retaining her former beauty and character, which seemed surprising and joyful to her. Then she asked why Isabella had come here, trying to understand the reasons for the unexpected visit and the girl's motivation. Mother reported that she had heard from the Count about Isabella's upcoming wedding and was very upset to learn that she had already moved here before the celebration itself, which seemed to her a premature step. She called her beloved daughter, and when she heard her voice, a deep longing arose in her soul, filling her heart, causing a storm of emotions that almost tore her apart. She wanted to know a lot of things: how Isabella was doing, how things were going, because the last time they met, she was sick, and now her heart was asking to understand what she was like now in the present moment. But despite this, the woman was not her real mother, and the feelings she experienced were so complex and confusing that it was difficult to understand what to call them correctly. She said that her mother always called her by her shortened name, and that is why she now had the desire to ask a question to the woman who called herself her relative. The main thing was to understand whether this woman was really her mother, or if she was just pretending, because doubts deeply troubled her soul and did not give her peace for a minute. The woman was very upset because she could not remember her mother saying that too much time had passed, and this loss left a gaping void in her soul filled with pain. Everything happened in such a way that the butler accidentally heard her words, and it seemed that this could change the course of further events because his attention was unexpectedly drawn to this difficult situation. He stated that the woman was posing as a member of a noble family without any basis for doing so, and therefore, in his opinion, she should be handed over to the guards so that everything could be properly sorted out. The woman who was accused was completely perplexed and could not understand how someone could allow themselves to speak in such a way, even in relation to their own mother. The butler asked if the lady was sure of her words, and she firmly confirmed her accusations without retreating or hesitating for a second in her words and decisions. According to the information that Single gave her yesterday, the lady's mother died 14 years ago, and this news caused her deep shock and inner shock. The Count promised to send a doctor to confirm the mother's condition, but never did so, as if he was deliberately ignoring his word and not wanting to fulfill the promise he had made. The lady's whole life was filled with deception on the part of the Count, and she bitterly admitted that her mother had died long ago, although this truth was carefully hidden from those around her. The woman tried to justify herself, explaining that she simply followed the Count's orders without thinking about the consequences and having no choice in her actions. She begged for mercy, but the lady insisted that the butler immediately prepare the carriage and was ready to set off at that very moment. The lady announced that she was heading to her father, Count Vanine, to personally sort out the situation and return what rightfully belongs to her. If the father really uses such dirty and vile methods and does not intend to give up the maid, the mistress is ready to intervene herself and resolve the issue. She firmly decided that she would come and pick up Annie herself, otherwise the situation would remain unresolved and would continue in the same spirit. When the lady arrived, she immediately encountered one of her brothers who was there at that moment and was waiting for her arrival. The brother asked in surprise what face she had come here with, expressing disbelief that she dared to appear in such circumstances. He told her that he had heard about her meeting with her mother and how Isabella had treated her coldly, as if she were an uninvited guest, and had thrown her out. The man did not understand how it was possible to do this to his own mother, considering it a cruel and unfair act. He was furious at what he heard, and the girl calmly stated in response that she really was an uninvited guest in those circumstances and could not do otherwise. She added that besides, everyone treated her the same way while she lived here, so she saw no reason to have any special complaints. Her brother became even angrier, and she responded by suggesting that perhaps she should behave just as harshly with him so that he would understand her mood and think about his behavior. She also noted that he should be more careful because if he fell down the stairs again, he would not get off with a minor bruise. The consequences could be much more serious. He couldn't understand what she was planning. It seemed that she was hoping for a quiet life without problems, but her words and actions spoke otherwise, as if she was preparing for serious changes. He suddenly grabbed her, but she replied that it was a completely different topic of conversation, after which she retreated, maintaining coldness and distance between them. She emphasized once again that he really needs to be careful with his actions, because the consequences can be dangerous, and this applies not only to falls, but also to words and actions. After these words, she pushed him with her foot and calmly walked past, declaring that in a few months she would become a duchess, and this position would radically change her life. She added that now he must be more careful with his speech, carefully consider every word he says, so as not to get into trouble because everything will change. She then went to where all the maids were and called her personal assistant to discuss further plans and actions in her new status. Annie, seeing the lady, was very happy and immediately asked what she was doing there since it was unexpected and looked like a sign of urgency. The lady took her hand and said that they needed to leave, but the girl did not understand why it was necessary to leave this place so suddenly and was surprised by such an abrupt decision. The lady smiled softly, promising that on the way she would tell everything that needed to be known so that it would become clearer how to proceed and what was important to consider in this situation. She said that first, they definitely needed to return to the duchy to resolve important matters and prepare for further steps, as there was still much waiting for their attention there. At the same time, she instructed Annie to immediately make all the necessary preparations in order to speed up the process and not waste time in this rush. The lady also noted that they should go quickly without delay, because at that moment, the Duke himself came out of the door, and the situation required decisiveness. The Duke, noticing the noise, asked what was going on, and Isabella replied that she had not seen him for a long time and had come to pick up her maid because, in her opinion, he had forgotten his promise. The Duke responded by noting that she had come for the maid but had not even greeted his father, which sounded somewhat strange and offensive to him. The girl apologized and admitted that she didn't really know her father and therefore couldn't display the usual politeness that would normally be expected in such cases. She added that he never treated her the way parents usually treat their daughter, and so there was not the connection and support that is expected. Still, if he insisted so much, she agreed to greet him to show at least the appearance of a normal relationship despite everything that had happened before. She also said that she received a gift from him and noted that there was a woman who claimed to be her mother, which added confusion and complications to their relationship. The gentleman asked in surprise what exactly the word claimed meant, because the girl had to know her real mother, not guess. It was important for him to understand what her words were based on. The girl replied that the Count should understand her because the situation was complicated, and she was not just saying that, but was experiencing internal pain and doubts that could not be ignored. She remembered that 14 years ago when the Count took her to his estate, much seemed different. There were many hopes and promises that seemed serious and sincere. In particular, he promised to send her mother a doctor to help and support her, but this promise then seemed more like a word than a deed, and in her memory it remained as a hope. And now he has once again confirmed this promise as if he wanted to show that he still remembers his words and intentions, trying to restore the lost trust. However, the girl knows that in reality the doctor was never sent, and this is not just her suspicion. The information was received from a verified and reliable source, so she is not ready to accept excuses. She demands that the gentleman stop denying the obvious facts and admit that the promise was not kept, because the truth is more important than empty words and attempts to avoid responsibility. The girl noted that since he did not keep his word, she no longer had any reason to stay in this place where she was deceived and betrayed and where she did not feel needed and protected. In response, he said that this was not so. She was his blood daughter, and he did not intend to let her go, asserting the importance of family ties that could not be simply destroyed or ignored. The girl, however, reminded him that she had already said that he had never treated her like a daughter, and that was why she felt like a stranger, unwanted and deprived of a real family. He also advised her that if she wanted to improve their relationship and gain respect, she should behave like a real noblewoman, that is, with dignity, pride, and an understanding of traditions and rules. The father repeated these instructions many times, which were hard for the girl to hear. Despite her inner doubts and resistance, she tried to listen and obey, understanding the importance of his words and trying to accept them. She believed that she was the main one in this story. She believed that she saved her mother by coming here for her sake and thereby changing their fate for the better, which gave her the strength to move forward and not give up. The girl really helped her mother, thanks to which everything turned out well. This faith supported her in difficult moments, and she firmly decided that when she grew up she would definitely meet her and tell her everything. Now she had no connection with her previous family at all. She distanced herself from everyone who was once close to her, as if she had broken all the threads that connected her to the past and gave her the opportunity to start a new life. Since then, she has persistently asked that none of her exes interfere in her life, try to control her destiny, or influence her decisions, preferring to build her own future without anyone else's instructions. In the evening, he stood by the window, looking into the darkness, and could not understand how she found out about her mother, which came as a complete surprise to him and called into question his previous assumptions about her awareness. If she did not know the truth, he could easily control her like a leash and would not meet any resistance because ignorance always makes control easier, making a person vulnerable to someone else's influence. Ivan could have been involved in some way, although the idea seemed incredible and did not fit into his image or usual behavior, but the very fact of such a suspicion was already worrying those around him. Despite his doubts deep down, he knew that Ivan was a cold-blooded man capable of keeping his emotions under control and would hardly go to such extreme measures for Isabella no matter the circumstances. Previously, it mattered to him who said what. Sources of information played a role, but now in this difficult situation, this lost its meaning and ceased to have any weight in solving problems. The most important thing now was to keep Isabella herself under control, because at any moment she could break away from the influence and turn directly to the Duke, which would significantly complicate the situation. Before this happened, it was necessary to urgently take some steps to keep her close, and not give her the opportunity to make a rash step that could change everything for the worse. He took the bell to call the servant, a gesture that signaled the beginning of organizational actions that were supposed to prevent further trouble and maintain control over the situation. The master ordered an urgent call for Catherine, a girl who needed to be sent immediately to the capital on an extremely important matter that could influence the course of events. If a chess piece ceases to fulfill its role, it is simply replaced by another one in order to maintain overall control and prevent the opponent from taking advantage of the weakness. Besides Isabella, there were many other girls at her disposal who were ready to play the role of the Duchess flawlessly and perform all the necessary tasks, maintaining the necessary level of influence. Isabella's memories were always associated with the delicate scent of roses and the warm touch of her mother's hands, which awakened in her soul a deep trepidation and a feeling of security. She often recalled how her mother told her that her little daughter was a real beauty, and these words filled her heart with tender love and light, warming her in difficult moments. Although these memories seemed alien to her, as if they were not her own, they still deeply touched her soul and left a barely noticeable trace inside, influencing her feelings. Every time she thought about it, her eyes involuntarily filled with tears. Pain and tenderness were mixed in her soul, intertwined in a painful feeling of loneliness. Suddenly, the silence was broken by the Duke's voice, which addressed her, interrupting her reverie and disturbing her calm, making her heart beat faster from surprise. Startled, she looked up and met his gaze, feeling tension, as if the air around her had become heavy and any moment could change a lot. He tried to cover her with his jacket, explaining that it was chilly outside, showing concern, but without unnecessary words. A servant came to the Duke with urgent news, but he did not immediately understand the reason for the concern. Perhaps Countess Vanaine had come to visit him again, as had happened before. However, the servant said that this time the matter was completely different, and explained that the reason was more serious than just the Countess's visit. Logan recounted to the Duke in detail all the events that had happened during the day, so that he would understand the whole essence of the situation. A woman suddenly came to them claiming to be Isabella's mother, explaining that her real mother had died long ago, and she was now claiming her role. It also turned out that 14 years ago, a special contract was concluded between the lady and the Count of Vanaine, which was of great importance. The Duke thought for a moment and asked what was happening to Lady Vannon herself, since she was directly connected to these events. The answer was alarming. Lady Vannon had already missed several meals and did not leave her room, as if something was bothering her greatly. The Duke asked if this was due to violence or some kind of pressure, and the servant noted that the maids had tried several times to serve her food, but she had refused. The Duke realized that the situation required immediate action and decided to leave the office to sort things out personally. He noticed in the documents that Lady Vannon was going somewhere early in the morning, and he could not understand why she would leave so early. Coming out into the garden, the Duke met her and immediately threw his jacket over her to warm her up on the cool morning. The girl was sure that someone in boots was really following her, and that they met by chance right here in this place where no one expected to see each other. The Duke related that his mother had died 10 years before of a fever severe and sudden, which spared no one in those days, and which had taken her too soon. Many doctors came to her, tried to help, but none of them could find a medicine that could save the Duke's mother from this terrible disease. The lady thought that this was not at all like Ivan. His behavior, words, and manners were different from what she knew about him before. Why did he suddenly start talking about his mother so often? Perhaps he learned about today's events from his servant and is now trying to support her in a difficult situation. He tries to comfort the lady because he can't do otherwise, but she doubts it, because perhaps he is just doing it out of politeness and not out of genuine concern. Until recently, he clearly felt only contempt for Isabella and showed no warm feelings towards her. But if things are different now, she thinks she would be pleased if he really started to care about her and show attention. The lady turned to the Duke with a direct question, trying to understand whether he was sincerely comforting her now or simply playing a role in order to create the appearance of concern and not attract unnecessary attention. The Duke turned away, and she noticed that if it was really a pretense, it did not cause her much concern. She felt quite calm without much excitement. Observing herself carefully, she realized that the situation did not cause her the strong emotions and anxieties that one might expect in such circumstances. Everything remained rather restrained. Despite this, the lady was grateful to the Duke for the care he showed and the efforts he put into trying to support her in this difficult moment, even if his feelings were not entirely sincere. His support really brought relief, and she felt that she could now fall asleep without any unnecessary thoughts, so she decided to go back to her room. Before leaving, she bade the Duke good night and quietly withdrew, leaving him alone with his thoughts in the deep silence that seemed to envelop them both. The Duke was a little surprised that the lady expressed only gratitude for the consolation without showing the emotions he expected, and this made him think about his feelings. Outwardly, she seemed more determined and confident than before, like a transformed golden lady filled with new inner strength and the light that she radiated. Despite all the trials and tribulations she had to endure, she retained an amazing softness and tenderness that could warm and touch the hearts of those around her. The Duke could not allow this fragile soul to ever experience pain or suffering. He wanted to protect her from all the hardships that came her way. He himself felt embarrassed, but he already clearly understood that his desire was to protect this lady, to be close, and protect her from any troubles and misfortunes that might happen. Later, the lady went to Sumbul, who greeted her with a friendly smile, showing that he was ready for her arrival and was expecting her appearance. She was surprised that he was actually waiting for her, but Sumbul explained that he knew about her visit in advance, rather than waiting for it in the literal sense, showing confidence. He then asked her if that would be an answer she would be happy with, hinting that his expectation was more of an intuitive premonition than a real patient anticipation of a meeting. The lady fell, and he immediately told her to sit down, showing care and attention to her condition, trying to help and support her at that moment. She was grateful for his attention and care, feeling supported and relieved by his offer to help. He showed genuine concern and asked if everything was okay with her, trying to understand how she was feeling at this difficult moment and not remain indifferent to her condition. The lady admitted that she did not yet fully understand what was happening, and he reminded her that they had recently talked about news related to her mother, which could have deeply affected her soul. Looking down, she admitted that she was trying to keep herself under control, despite the fact that inside she felt pain and experienced strong emotions that were not easy to cope with. She noted that much of this was expected, so she did not experience any real shock, but she still found it all very difficult and hard emotionally. The most acute test for her was the moment of separation, when for the first time a strong inner emptiness and painful doubts about herself and the future appeared. Fears and doubts arose in her thoughts about whether she would be able to survive, although the doctors were supposed to monitor her and help her cope with the situation, giving her hope. However, she had no idea that in fact no doctor had been referred to her, and there was simply no real support to be expected. He felt her silence, listened attentively, and then asked what exactly made her come to him today in order to understand the reasons and true intentions of her visit. The lady said that she came to find her mother's grave to visit it and feel a connection with the past to find at least some comfort and peace. He remained silent for a moment in response, and then handed her several documents as if preparing her for further steps and easing the possible difficulties in the search. He explained that he had found out in advance which cemetery her mother was buried in order to help her quickly find the right place to visit without unnecessary hassle and mistakes. It was the cemetery where the lady had once lived in her youth, a place important for memory and remembrance. She expressed her gratitude and admitted that she always believed in his abilities, although she did not expect that he would be able to figure everything out and understand all the details so quickly. He gently wiped away her tears and smiled, noting that he usually only gave such attention and care to his most important and special clients. He added that if she suddenly needed help or support, she could without a doubt contact him at any convenient time and without unnecessary formalities. The Duke showed interest and asked if anything serious had happened to the lady, his gaze expressing genuine concern and a desire to help. The lady said that if he had a free minute, she would like to discuss something important with him, but she did so with the hint that the conversation would be better held in a more secluded place. He understood her hints and suggested that they go into a separate room to talk calmly and without unnecessary prying eyes and ears. He noted that there was indeed a draft where they were now and that this was another reason to move to a warmer and more comfortable room. Despite slight embarrassment, the lady agreed, realizing that the Duke was truly showing her sincere concern and attention. He had just spoken about her health and well-being, which made her feel supported and confident in his intentions. Once they were in the room, he asked what exactly she wanted to talk about, and the lady replied that she would like to be assigned a personal doctor to monitor her condition on an ongoing basis. He asked her why exactly she thought the court physician was unreliable, trying to understand the reasons for this opinion and what exactly made her doubt his competence. The lady explained that her concern was due to the fact that she had another candidate whom she wanted to vouch for and support in this situation. She did not ask for the doctor to move to her estate. She only wanted him to be able to monitor her health and live nearby so that he could quickly come to her aid if necessary. If this woman's visits were to be frequent, she intended to visit the mansion frequently, so she decided to ask permission in advance to avoid any misunderstandings. The gentleman remained silent, realizing that he would not be able to immediately agree to such a step, since this decision requires time and a balanced approach. However, if Aaron's visits really become frequent and regular, the situation may change for the better and take on a more convenient format. Then Arya will begin to visit Lucifer often, which will create new opportunities for communication and rapprochement between them. If Lucifer and Arya see each other more often, their relationship could develop and strengthen much faster than the original plot suggested. She was already thinking about love and new feelings, which was noticeably reflected in her mood and facial expression, as if she was anticipating changes in her life. The gentleman said that he understood her position and gave her freedom of action, allowing her to do as she saw fit, trusting her judgment and intentions. She thanked him for his understanding and support, and he smiled back, which created a light and trusting atmosphere between them. She also mentioned that she would need to go away somewhere for a while tomorrow. It was an important trip that she couldn't talk about right away, but she planned to dedicate the day to it. He said he was only repeating it because she should decide for herself what to do, and not have to ask his permission every time. Her freedom of choice remained an important point for him. The gentleman said that in that case she would have to leave tomorrow for 2 days and 1 night. He wondered where exactly she was going, but she left the question unanswered. The lady said that perhaps he had already heard from Logan, but in the village where she used to live, there was her mother's grave, and this place was very important to her. She would like to visit her mother's grave to honor her memory and spend some time there, which was very important to her spiritually. Instead of an escort, She will take a maid with her, believing that this will be enough to provide herself with the necessary support on the road. The Duke reminded her that she was the future mistress of the house, and that she should always remember her duties and status, even when it came to personal travel. He was going to go with her, but the lady said that it was not necessary and it would be better to hire an accompanying knight for such a trip so as not to create unnecessary inconveniences. He assumed that she was simply uncomfortable with his presence, and that was the reason for her refusal, but she had a different opinion. The gentleman replied that this was not the problem at all, and she would like him to understand this without unnecessary assumptions. Then he noted that he saw no reason to refuse him, because soon they would become one family, and this was an important stage in their relationship. As a future husband, he found it impossible to ignore her requests and wishes, especially in such important matters as this trip. However, he did not understand why they should go so far if their marriage was intended only as an agreement of convenience and not based on feelings and trust. Lucifer asked the lady why he could not go with her because he really wanted to be with her on the trip, but they explained to him that this was impossible. The lady replied that although they would pass through the portal, they would still have to ride in a carriage, and the boy would not be able to withstand such a long ride in it. Lucifer said he wanted to go too, and was clearly upset that he wasn't being taken along. He really wanted to take a walk with his father and mistress, spend time with them, and feel like part of the company. Suddenly, the lady asked to take care of the young master so that he would not need anything and would feel comfortable. The boy also asked if he would go with them after all, hoping for a positive answer. The lady said that they would go together despite the doubts, and it was a joyful moment for Lucifer. The Duke, the lady, and Lucifer had never traveled together before, and this was a new experience for them. The boy said that this was wonderful and immediately went to get ready for the upcoming trip. Now the lady has the opportunity to get to know Ivan better and spend more time with him on the road. As they were leaving, the maid reminded her mistress to take care of herself and be careful on the road. The lady said that everything was ready for departure, and she thought it was time to get out and start the journey. Logan suggested that the lady move to another carriage to make the journey more comfortable and safer. The hired crew paid no attention to the bad road conditions, and the ride was so rough that she felt that she simply could not stand such shaking and was about to die from such a ride. Lucifer himself, on the contrary, looked very happy and contented. She asked him how he felt after such a jolt, trying to understand whether this trip was causing him discomfort. The boy smiled widely, saying that he was enjoying the ride, and she was very happy that he was enjoying everything and feeling well despite the sudden jerks and jolts. A strange feeling came over her deep in her soul. After all, soon she would have to meet not her own mother but someone else, and this caused mixed emotions and slight anxiety in her heart. Suddenly, the carriage braked sharply, causing everyone to feel a strong jolt, and she jerked forward sharply, losing her balance and almost falling under the impact of the jolt. The gentleman instantly grabbed the lady by the hands, holding her, and she, trying to calm the situation, said that she was fine and was not going to fall, although inside everything was shaking from surprise. The push was so strong that she was literally thrown far back, but the Duke immediately caught her in his arms, preventing her from falling and thus saving her from possible injury. She noticed that the Duke himself seemed a little confused and embarrassed after this incident, as if he himself had not expected such an abrupt stop and its consequences. The lady met the Duke's gaze and felt herself a little embarrassed by the fact that their eyes met at that moment, giving the situation a special intimacy. His eyes were extraordinarily beautiful, and she couldn't help but think about it, noting for herself how deep and expressive his gaze was at that very moment. Meanwhile, Lucifer became even more frightened and immediately asked if everything was okay, with the lady worrying about her condition after such a sharp movement of the carriage. She quickly replied that she felt fine and hurried to rise from the Duke's arms, trying to show that she was fine and there was no reason to worry. At the same time, she apologized for accidentally falling on the Duke, emphasizing that it was not done on purpose, and asked for forgiveness for this awkward moment. She thought that things could have been worse, that the situation wasn't as bad as it had seemed at first. There was some relief in her soul from this realization. Later, she decided that it was not worth returning to these thoughts for a long time, that it was better to forget them, leave them in the past, and not to worry herself in vain. This helped her to remain calm. She noticed that the Duke tried not to look at her, directly turned away, and looked embarrassedly out the window as if he wanted to avoid meeting her eyes and hide his feelings. After this event, they went together to her mother's grave to honor her memory, spend time, and express their feelings at this important place. Even though it was not her real mother's grave, but only a symbolic place, she still felt the same heaviness and sadness in her soul. She hoped that she wasn't lonely there, that someone was nearby, and that this place didn't leave her completely alone with sad thoughts. The lady told Logan that she would like to renovate her mother's grave, and asked if it was possible to do so that the place would look better and more dignified. Logan confidently replied that of course he would take care of it and hire the right people who could do the job efficiently and quickly. The maid wiped the grave to make it look tidy, and Isabella decided to do whatever it took to fulfill the request and tidy up the grave. At that moment, she noticed that Lucifer approached the grave with a bouquet of flowers in his hands, which he had asked her to take with him in advance. This surprised her, and she wondered what kind of flowers he was carrying and why he had chosen them for this occasion. The gentleman explained that the bouquet was intended for her mother, and looking at the light in Lucifer's eyes, she understood the sincerity and meaning of this gesture. Through Isabella's mother, she was able to see her family, who were now forever in the past and would never be able to meet again. Those who did not love her never changed, but she still kept them deep in her heart. She felt very grateful and touched by these flowers and decided to give them to Isabella's mother to express her feelings and memories associated with them despite all the difficulties. Her family existed only in distant memories, somewhere in the depths of her consciousness, as a bright image that supported her when things were difficult and lonely in the present. She moved forward in life determined to continue living under the name Isabella Adelhart, maintaining faith and hope despite all the trials she would have to endure. Lucifer was absolutely delighted when they walked along the shore together. He noted that the water in this place was unusually blue and cool, as if nature itself was breathing freshness. Summer had just begun, and Lucifer knew that he shouldn't go deep into the water. It was dangerous because the beginning of the season often conceals unexpected risks. Logan suddenly said that he needed to talk to the owner about an important matter which could not wait any longer, as the situation required an urgent solution. The gentleman at first thought that they could discuss this later, but the servant insisted, emphasizing that the matter could not be delayed, especially since there was only one room free. Everyone was shocked by this news because finding a place to spend the night turned out to be very difficult, and Logan, after a long search, was able to find only one free room. The lady was in a state of shock that they would apparently have to sleep 5 in one room, which seemed incredible and very inconvenient under the circumstances. Logan suggested that he and the maid could spend the night in a carriage nearby where they would set up a small camp, and then everyone else would have enough room and comfort. They were supposed to sleep together, and it seemed like a big surprise to everyone. It turned out that according to the terms, they would have to spend the night in one room and on one bed, which raised many questions and doubts. Isabella didn't understand why this was such a problem, and asked again if she really would have to sleep with the Duke and Lucifer. She couldn't believe it was so serious and uncomfortable. The Duke confirmed that there was one bed for all, and added that it would be better if the lady remained with them in the carriage. This proposal caused some confusion, but he believed that it would be more convenient for everyone. However, the Duke insisted that he would remain with them in the camp, and the servant should not be counted. For him, it was normal, and he would remain separately. He believed that official duties did not interfere with their rest. The gentleman said that she did not understand the whole situation, but then the servant took the hint and promised to organize everything so that there would be no inconvenience. He decided that he would take on the solution of this issue. The minister realized that he should not have intervened at all, and now he felt bad about trying too hard to help in a situation that could have been handled more easily. In the evening, they went to bed. The lady found herself next to Lucifer. Despite the fatigue after the long journey, he quickly fell asleep, and she was still worried about possible discomfort for him. Lucifer was very tired from the journey, and she was afraid that he would be uncomfortable in his new surroundings. But to her relief, he slept soundly and peacefully, which calmed her anxiety a little. She wondered how her maid and Ivan were doing and whether they were really comfortable spending the night there. She was concerned that everyone felt comfortable and safe. He did not do it because of a strong desire or passion, but rather because of something important that made him make such a decision. His motivation was not simple and was personal. She sat by the window, her gaze directed towards the fire near which someone was sitting. The evening flames softly illuminated the figure, creating a warm but slightly lonely atmosphere. If you think deeper, you can understand that he took this step solely for her sake because of the feelings and cares he had for her. His actions were dictated not by egoism but by sincere affection. She approached him and wanted to know why he was alone in this place, what made him separate from the others. Her concern was noticeable. She wanted to understand his condition and the reason for such a choice. He explained that the others had gone to get firewood and he himself had remained where he was. Then he asked with interest why she was not sleeping, whether she was experiencing any discomfort or anxiety that was disturbing her peace. The lady replied that she was comfortable and nothing was bothering her, she just couldn't sleep. Her words were calm, but there was a hint of fatigue or inner tension in them. He asked if she was okay, if there was anything that was bothering her or requiring attention. His concern was expressed in simple questions that showed his concern. The lady realized that after visiting her mother's grave, she was being consoled again, and this became the support she had expected in a difficult moment. This understanding brought her some relief. Previously, his gaze expressed severity and even some contempt, which was noticeable to those around him. This was part of his complex character and reputation which developed over the years. In society, he was considered a ruthless man, tough and unyielding, which often frightened and repelled those around him, even if this was not entirely true deep down. But despite all this, he brought her to the mansion as his bride, which spoke of the seriousness of his intentions and the desire to have her by his side, despite prejudices and rumors. He tried to comfort her when she cried in the garden, showing a care and tenderness that was rarely seen by others. These moments showed another side of him, a less severe one. Today, he accompanied her on the road, and all this was done by his own choice without any pressure from outside. His actions were voluntary and sincere. Despite her difficult relationship with Ivan, she could now say that she was grateful to him for worrying about her and showing attention even if it was difficult to show in words. She realized that he was much kinder than many people thought, and she felt it not only in her heart, but also in the little things that showed up in his actions and looked sometimes barely noticeable. At that moment, changes were gradually taking place between them, not immediately noticeable, but perceptible. Something in their relationship began to change, as if an invisible thread connected them more strongly than before. The next day, the lady woke up with a high temperature, feeling weak and unwell, which did not leave her. This was unexpected and alarming because she had never had to deal with such a condition before. The cold appeared after a light sea breeze which seemed harmless but apparently turned out to be the cause of her illness. She tried to understand why it affected her because it seemed that everything around was fine. Moreover, she could not understand why she had caught a cold and not someone else. Aaron, her close friend, suggested that perhaps the reason was that the lady had simply been overexerting herself lately. Thinking about home and rest made her agree with this opinion because fatigue was really accumulating, and perhaps it was this that caused the illness and weakness of the body. It had only been 3 weeks since she had entered this world, but so much had happened in that time that it felt like a lifetime had passed. It had all left her exhausted and made her realize how quickly her surroundings were changing. During these weeks, she had to deal with the conclusion of a marriage contract, the beginning of cooperation with Sumbiul, and conflicts with her own family, which left her very tired and exhausted to the limit. The doctor, having examined her, advised a good rest and assured that the disease was not too dangerous. He said that for Isabella this was a temporary phenomenon, and there was no need to worry too much. Lucifer, on the contrary, could not understand the seriousness of the situation and did not want to leave his mistress remaining close by and protecting her despite the doctor's warnings. The doctor explained that the disease could be transmitted, but the boy was confident in his strength and claimed that he was not in danger of catching a cold. He was too strong to get sick. Despite Lucifer's confidence, the doctor repeated that even if this was true, everyone needed a break from the hustle and bustle. Only in peace and quiet would Isabella quickly recover and be able to return to playing with the boy. He felt sad, but he understood the situation and wished her a speedy recovery so that she would quickly recover and be able to be in full health again without delaying her recovery. Demand expressed confidence that she would definitely recover for him and that her recovery would be quick, because she strives to do this not only for herself but also for those who support her. She assured him that she would definitely get better, and at that moment Logan thought that perhaps he would not be promoted since he was denied an audience, which upset him a little, but he understood the reasons. The Duke then noted that the situation was indeed difficult, and they would have to find another way to solve the problem, and Logan also informed the gentleman that the lady had caught a cold and needed care. The doctor explained that the cold was caused by exposure to cold wind, which had a negative impact on her health and led to a deterioration in her condition, which required a cautious approach to treatment. The Duke asked how she was feeling at the moment, and the servant replied that she was already much better than during the day, which inspired hope for a speedy recovery. Despite his cold, he noted that he needed to step away so as not to disturb her and leave her to rest in peace so that her recovery would proceed without unnecessary worries and stress. The lady lay in her bed thinking, trying to understand what time it was since the time of her condition seemed vague due to illness and weakness. She supposed that it was probably time to wake up and start a new day, but weakness did not allow her to quickly get up and get down to business. At that moment, she noticed that someone had entered the room, and she became curious about who exactly had appeared since the presence of a stranger was unexpected. She had no idea who this man was. He was too big for Lucifer, but at the same time he looked like him, which made her curious and a little confused. She was completely taken aback when she realized that it was the Duke himself standing in front of her, which suddenly changed her mood and thoughts, causing a mixture of surprise and excitement. He ordered her to lie down again and not to get up, saying that it was not worth getting up. She asked where her maid had gone, wanting to know why she was not there at that moment. The gentleman explained that the maid had gone out to change the water and would be back soon, promising that it would only take a little time. After that, he inquired about her well-being, asking if she was feeling better, trying to understand how much her condition had improved. She replied that she was grateful to him for his concern, and noted that the doctor's medicine that he gave her really helped and had a positive effect. He placed his hand on her forehead to feel her body temperature, trying to check if she had a fever and how severe the illness was. He stated that she still had a fever, noticing this by touch and his own feelings. She objected that in fact she did not have a temperature and that this was most likely a mistake on his part, not corresponding to reality. According to her, his hand was too cold, and that was what caused him to feel a sensation of heat on her forehead, although in fact there was no fever. She assumed that he had been outside recently, and that was why he thought she had a fever. She wondered why he had even come into her room at that moment. The gentleman did not answer at first and remained silent, which made her think that he had nothing to say about this matter and simply did not want to explain himself. Perhaps he came to hear about her illness, she suggested, since when Lucifer fell ill, she herself asked that they come to him and find out how he was. Isabella confirmed her words, noting that the situation was completely different at the moment, and now was not the time to worry about it. She was sure that everything was different now. She tried to explain to Ivan that this was the only way he could express his feelings towards Lucifer, show his emotions more openly, and understand their depth. But since Ivan brought it up, it probably meant that he genuinely cared about her, even if he wasn't always good at expressing his feelings. Isabella was very confused, trying to understand if he really meant that he was worried about her and wanted to help her in difficult times, which seemed important to her. She could not understand why exactly he was doing this, and why his concern was directed specifically at her, which caused her questions and doubts. Ivan explained that her mother died because she was left alone and wasted away in solitude for a long time without receiving the necessary support and attention. The lady asked if he was afraid that something similar could happen to her, and if he was worried about her future and her health while alone. She was surprised, and even pleasantly surprised, that Ivan had such a warm and caring side that she had not noticed before. Then she began to wonder why, despite his headache, Ivan seemed sweeter and kinder to her than even Lucifer, who usually seemed closer to her. But overall, she admitted that it was really very nice of him to come to her at such a moment and show attention and care. The lady also noted that she would like to know what the Duchess was like. Before that is what was the personality and character of the previous mistress of these lands. Although this of course did not matter much, because she herself would take responsibility for the affairs of the duchy for the next 3 years and would decide all important issues. But she was still curious about who this woman was, and Ivan said that he had few memories of his mother since he spent little time with her. She fell ill immediately after his birth, and since then Ivan realized that he did not have the opportunity to fully spend time with his mother, which affected his memory. It was really sad, and she gradually realized that she had crossed that fine line that could not be crossed without consequences for herself and others. She explained that she did not mean to offend anyone, trying to emphasize that her words and actions were not intended to cause pain or anger. He responded by saying that it was very sad, and he himself did not understand why this was happening. He did not want to cry, but at the same time he considered himself bad because of everything that happened. She understood that if she was truly sad, she would not be able to hold back her tears, and this was a natural manifestation of feelings that could not be stopped by force or desire. People judged him, pointing fingers and shouting that he should cry at his mother's funeral because society demanded that he show emotions that he didn't seem to have. This was especially difficult if the cause of grief was the death of parents, which was considered a huge loss, and a person was expected to express grief in all its forms. He asked her if he really looked like a monster, trying to understand how much those around him misunderstood and judged him by his outward appearance.